The story begins in the third round of the last phase of a competition. There stood the youngest participant of the competition. That boy was named Yu Sangyum. The narrator informs that this young man had scored 10 points in all his long-range hits, wondering if on his last arrow he would hit the mark again. He then prepares to hit the target, throwing the arrow and striking dead center. People are surprised, not believing he had hit, hugging him and saying he was a genius sent by God. And then he ends up being the champion of the competition. Sometime later, his boss was throwing a mountain of papers in the protagonist's face. The bald man calls the young man, asking if he was distracted. Sangyun apologizes as he had not noticed. Next, the old man tells him to get ready, asking what those documents were thinking, where he could use the protagonist with those useless skills. Sometime later, the boy had done everything he had to do, saying he had done a good job. Then it ends up getting dark. The boy was watching a video remembering his championship, mentioning that it had been 10 years since that day, because the bow was the only thing he had. However, it cost a lot of money to chase his dream, and he still lived with his grandmother, so he had no choice but to give it up. And day after day, he continued training again and again, thinking it was incredible to be someone who already had a certain and promising future, because he was sure he would have a bright future. But it was not as he thought, because if his coach had not introduced him to that job, he would be unemployed forever. The boy becomes sad remembering his past, saying that it was enough to remember all that, affirming that he would watch a live to unwind. Looking for a live, he realizes that they were only broadcasting live from a game called Full Dive, a game that made you feel like you were in real life and one of the ones that had the best experiences, being able to play the game with a console in the form of a capsule. However, it was very expensive, so the protagonist could not even dream of getting a console like that. Even so, the boy feels happy because he could at least watch this incredible game. Watching the live, one of the viewers sends a gift saying for the guy who killed a pig with a bow in less than 15 minutes. Aiming several arrows at once, the boy says he will get it very easy, thanking for the donut. Then he throws the arrows with magic at the pig. However, he did not hit any. Then the chat starts to tease him because it was very easy to hit. The guy sends a donut again, asking why he had picked up a bow because he did not even know how to use one, and the boy responds that he thought everything was possible in the game, giving an excuse that the machine was delayed. Sangyun observes the comments, teasing the streamer, thinking about what the guy said, because it would be a lie if he said he did not envy them. Because if he had the opportunity, he wished to sacrifice himself, giving his all and being recognized by everyone. The boy turns off the computer, thinking that it was already time to sleep. Then the night passes, and the young man thinks he should restructure himself, making a resignation request. His boss warns that if he left without a problem, they would take good care of him. But if he was excluded during this period, he would have a great chance of not getting a spot again. Even so, the boy wanted to resign. The bald man asks if that was really his choice, and the protagonist affirms, mentioning that if he left at that moment, he would also receive compensation. Then he asks the young man to sign the contract today, telling him not to regret his choice because he entered with connections. The boy thinks that everyone in that company went through a lot of trouble to enter that agency, where they even studied abroad. However, they had no choice. Sometime later, the protagonist was in his bed reflecting on his past, remembering again that it had been 10 years. The youngest national championship winner, who was just a high school student. He becomes sad because he always remembered his past, wishing to correct his mistakes. Thinking about what he should do, his cell phone suddenly rings. Sangyun, observing the notifications, realizes that the streamer from before was doing a live again, trying to kill the pig. Remembering the words the guy said before, saying that if everything was possible in that game, it would also be possible to use the bow and arrow as before, and besides, he would stream for people to see him. However, he wonders if using his skill he would be able to become popular, mentioning that the guy who was watching the live before was the one who watched the most, and although he was not a good player, his viewers liked him. Then he starts to search on his computer if there were many streamers besides him, realizing that there were many people in this world who recorded all kinds of live. Realizing that there was much more than he thought, he says he had many excellent streamers. Besides, there were many who showed their skills for those who watched to improve. Without a doubt, it was a much bigger world than he imagined. A giant world of options he could choose. Sangyun remembers that that was the world he loved and lived when he was younger, where he was dedicated to constantly improving and competing with others. A simple world, but very distant. However, even so, he wanted to try. Sometime later, Sangyun was talking to his friend, saying he would buy the console. The guy is surprised because the protagonist would spend all his money just on a game, asking several things about the situation. Observing the situation, the protagonist wonders if there really was any problem doing that, because in his old company, Juhyuk was the only person he could trust because there were no trustworthy people there. And unlike him, his friend had a successful life among the elite, creating a path to his success. Juhyuk asks the boy how much the capsule was, saying he wanted to give that money to his friend and mentioning that there was additional equipment in it. Sangyun is surprised because he needed other equipment, and the guy asks if he thought it was just the capsule, mentioning that his electricity bill would go up. Sometime later, the protagonist and his colleague were observing a building, realizing that they were in a place where they rented capsules. The protagonist asks why they were there because he needed to buy one of them and not rent. Next to the entrance, a man was collecting trash. That guy was one of the store employees asking if he wanted to buy a capsule, because if the boy wanted, he could sell them for a cheaper price and call in the young man to take a look. Inside the store, Sang-yeon observes the capsules, being surprised at how they were. Then the guy suggests to the protagonist before buying it is better to test one of them, taking the young man for some physical tests because to enter the capsule that was necessary. While the protagonist was doing the tests, his friend was outside along with the employee thanking him for his help. The guy says it was no big deal but suggests stopping the boy, because there were many people like him who watched the streamers playing and thought they could do the same showing their skills. However, it was not as they thought it would be. The boy asks if even games with augmented reality were so different from real life. Then he answers that yes, because in the game he could use his physical abilities. However, as the game had no physical limitations, there was a lack of discernment and mentality in people, mentioning that the protagonist had been fired from his company, so maybe he would give up playing the game after the test. The guy tells the protagonist that the game he was going to play was called Real Olympics because he had been an athlete. Closing the capsule, the protagonist goes into a trance with the machine thinking it was incredible and mentioning that he felt his mind was going somewhere else. At that moment, Sang-yeon opens his eyes realizing he was in another place, looking down and seeing that he was holding a bow and arrow. He is perplexed because it was like reality. Then the boy prepares to shoot the first arrow, wondering if he didn't remember when he used his bow because his hands were trembling. Watching the protagonist, his friend asks why he hasn't shot yet, and the guy says he must be nervous. But seeing the protagonist, he says there was no way he could be nervous. Sang-yeon says all this was different from real life, realizing he was no longer trembling. Then he shoots the arrow, hitting the target dead center. The two are surprised because he scored 10 points. Then Sang-yeon continues to shoot several times, hitting all the arrows. His friend asks if the game was really different from real life, but the guy says the protagonist was getting used to it incredibly fast. However, observing him better, he says he might be mistaken because it was different, asking who was really that boy. Then the match ends and the protagonist exits the game. The employee says he was amazing, saying it would be a waste for the boy to buy just a second-line product, suggesting buying a better one. With Sang-yeon downcast, the guy asks if everything was okay with him. Watching the protagonist, his friend wonders what his true identity would be, remembering that he was the youngest to win a gold medal, mentioning that the boy could have been the best in the world until an accident happened, and saying that he really wanted to help him since the protagonist really liked that, remembering that it had been a long time since he used the bow and arrow. How could he forget that accident? That cold look from the doctor watching the protagonist. The dream that Sang-yeon had to give up. Sometime later, already at the protagonist's house, the capsule was already installed. At the same instant, Sang-yeon already starts the machine to test, happy because he could start streaming whenever he wanted. Remembering that the store clerk had given a good price on the capsule, he worries if that was a good deal. Then Sang-yeon begins to start his streaming, making the preparations, choosing a game. Kyeonjijo in age, a game in medieval times with a focus on the life of a mercenary, was not very famous, but has its own fan base. Popular games have a larger number of streamers, but that game did not have a large number of players, so it would be a good game to start as a streamer. At the same instant, the boy finished creating his character. The system informs that the game would start in 5 seconds, and then the protagonist enters. In a giant flash, someone calls the boy. Opening his eyes, Sang-yeon realizes he was in a carriage. Looking around, the boy wonders where he was. However, he realizes something. At that exact moment, a battle was happening. The protagonist notices that confusion, and at the same instant, someone calls him. A man pointing the sword at Sang-yeon asks if he needed another attack to get up. This guy is the captain of the mercenaries. Sang-yeon apologizes, thinking if it was him who had assaulted him. The guy informs that they were being attacked and tells the boy to grab a weapon. At that moment, the system appears asking him to choose one. Sang-yeon, looking at the options, is confused about why there was no option for a bow. At the same instant, someone comments on his live asking if he wanted a challenge with a bow. The boy is surprised when he realizes that there were people watching him, thinking he chose the right game. Sang-yeon asks why he should do a challenge to get bow. Then the guy asks if he was new to the game, saying that bows could hit allies, besides that he would need to count his arrows, which could end up being bad. The boy understands how it is and thanks the person who was watching. Then the guy suggests the protagonist to pick up a sword, however the boy chooses the bow anyway. Then they start teasing him, saying that he was a newbie and besides that he was bad, but the protagonist didn't care. He wonders where his bow was, but at the same instant, a bow hits a person behind him. With the guy down and an arrow in his chest, the bow flies towards the protagonist. The system informs that he got a bow, however he only had 20 arrows, and the chat starts teasing the protagonist, saying that always happened when a newbie chose a bow. His captain observes the boy standing still and asks why he wasn't doing anything, asking him to attack. Sang-yeon focus begins to aim at his target. Watching attentively, he shoots the arrow towards the enemy, hitting precisely his enemy, making the chat of his lives surprised with his skill. The boy thinks that it was different from traditional archery, assuming he was between the modern and the current era. Asking the chat if to defeat the enemies he needed only one arrow, but the chat says that in that game, they simulated everything as if it were in real life. Sang-yeon thanks for the explanation and thinks that it was just him always hitting the head. His chat teases the boy again because no one believed in him, but he would prove to them with results. Then he starts to shoot his arrows, hitting all the vital points of each one. The boy says it was getting late, so he should finish that once, thinking he thought he wouldn't be able to hit the moving targets, but it was very easy. Sang-yun observes his captain who was in a battle, realizing that it was a battle of shield bearers, wondering if he should help him, but if he did, that he could end up running out of arrows. At the same instant, Sang-yun notices a gap, shooting his arrow at the head of the enemy. He realizes that it was the last enemy because all the others had fled. The boy realizes that the chat was not typing anything asking what had happened. But the chat starts typing incredulous with what he had done because it was not normal asking several things to him. Sang-yun asks if he did something wrong or if he shouldn't have killed the boss. However, the chat says that it was not possible to kill him, leaving him confused because they had said that everything died with a shot. Then the chat mentions that it was not always that a boss took a blow to the head, and he affirms asking how he had done that because it was impossible, saying that the bosses have a shield, so if you're not fast, they dodge everything. Then Sang-yun asks if they never used a bow because it was easy to pull the arrow. He is surprised, asking if the protagonist could pull the bow to the maximum every time. However, a person arrives calling the protagonist, asking if that was really him because he was different, saying that it was incredible, saying that he had never seen anyone as good as the boy with a bow and arrow. The chat is surprised because it was the first time they saw the captain speaking that way. While he asks who that mercenary he had never seen before, the game community was known as the Age of the Kingdom, but it had stagnated. Although most players liked the game, the lack of interesting moments made the community discuss the same things over and over again, until one day there was a different post. A boy who was just a beginner, instead of running away, killed the boss alone and was praised by his captain. Everyone is surprised, thinking that it was fake because they had never seen Roman praise someone, thinking it was impossible because it was just a novice who had created his account a few days ago. He is surprised by all those comments because he could never imagine that it would happen to him, thinking it would be good for them to continue discussing because it would increase his image. But the boy is surprised by a comment, saying that even Electro, who was a veteran, would not come out unscathed from that boss. Sang-yun remembers that name because it was one of the players who had more visibility on streamers. He is surprised because in just a few days he was already being compared to one of the best. Then the chat says it would be bad for the boy to compare himself with someone so great because it would be very cruel. Watching all that, Sang-yun asks if it was real. At the same instant, his phone rings. Who had called was his friend, asking if his live had been successful, and the boy confirms. He asks if there was any problem with the machine, however the protagonist warns that it was working perfectly. His friend asks if he had any views, and the protagonist says he had 20. Surprised by so many views for a beginner, asking what he had done to get so many. But the boy says he just chose a good game. The guy asks why he had so much talent, and the conversation continues for a while. The protagonist warns that he would hang up because he needed to make the preparations for his live, but the guy asks if he would start at dinner time. However, the boy says he didn't have dinner because that was his job now. His friend smiles happily for him. At the same instant, someone calls him, asking why he was eating at that time. And then he hangs up the phone. Opening the capsule, the boy thinks he should have eaten better, but he wanted to start as soon as possible, because since he started in that community, his heart wouldn't stop racing, wondering how long he hadn't felt that way. The attention he had and all that was incredible. The boy then starts his live, receiving a flood of comments asking why he was doing live at that time. Sang-yun finds it strange because the comments were moving much faster than before. Then he checks the views, which had increased much more. Surprised by that number of viewers, the protagonist gets nervous because he had never been in a situation like that. However, he sighs, thinking that it was not real life, because it was just a game he was playing in third person, saying that when he played that game, his nervousness disappeared in a flash. Then the boy recomposes himself, saying to go back to where they had stopped before, going back to the protagonist's friend. He thinks they should never bother someone when they are eating. At the same instant, he receives a message from Sang-yun thanking him, saying that when they met again, he would buy him a drink. His friend is happy because he was working hard, affirming that Sang-yun had always been a diligent person. But he remembers something. There was something he was going to say before hanging up, but he ended up forgetting. At that moment, someone arrives, saying that he had a meeting at that moment, confused about what he was supposed to say to the boy, and remembering that it was something about body optimization. Going back to the protagonist, he mentions that before going to sleep, he had done some research on sites about how streamers manage their audiences in case of controversies. Remembering the tips from the streamers, the boy starts to thank the people who were in the live before. The viewers are surprised because he even remembered the names of those who were before, saying that he already had people who watched him in the early morning and that he was a genius. Sang-yun is embarrassed, mentioning that calling him a genius was too much. Then the boy starts to enter the game. Opening his eyes, he realizes he was riding a horse, remembering that he had asked Roman to introduce him to his captain, and at that moment he was going on a mission, saying that he should explain what was happening to his viewers. At the same instant, the protagonist receives a mission to escort a noble, thinking that mission was nothing special. Sang-yun thought that, as he was a mercenary, he wouldn't think he would end up becoming a bodyguard. The boy is surprised, saying the game was really realistic because it seemed like he was riding a real horse. Then his captain asks if it was his first time riding a horse. Sangyun says he only had a few opportunities to ride one while thinking he spoke naturally with an NPC. Roman says he should get used to it quickly, opening a smile saying that the boy would do it more often. The chat is surprised because Roman was smiling saying they had never seen him act that way. While the protagonist was riding, one of the viewers asked the boy what kind of mission was that, asking if that wasn't the mission where a group of bandits on horseback would appear. At the same instant they realize something, a group of bandits approaching to rob them. The protagonist is surprised because the bandits really had come to attack them. His viewers are happy because they would finally be able to see the protagonist in action again. Sangyun thinks that he didn't just have viewers who liked him but also those who wished for his failure, mentioning that it was normal in a sport. Watching his targets, the boy says they were moving very fast, besides there were many of them. At the same instant, the protagonist begins to prepare to shoot his arrow, asking why those mercenaries always lost. Then he shoots his arrow, hitting the leader of them right. All the viewers are surprised by what he had done, and the boy questions what was happening. Then the chat asks if he didn't see what he had done because he had just defeated their captain, but Sangyun says it was by accident, and that he should continue because the battle was not over yet. Then Sangyun shoots his arrows one by one. Each arrow he shot was a life taken. Watching the boy's skills, the bandits start to run away. However, the protagonist could not let them escape. Realizing that they were fleeing, Roman gives the order for the boy to kill them all. At the same instant, the system updates his mission for him to defeat all the bandits. While the protagonist was at war, someone was watching his live asking who he was. Watching the boy's live, the guy doesn't understand why Sangyun was using a bow, assuming it could be a challenge. The person who was watching the protagonist live was one of the biggest streamers, Acorn Jelly. Watching the boy's live, he is surprised by what he sees, because Sangyun was defeating the bandits only with a bow and arrow, saying that it was not common because just one shot in the head would not be enough. Then he wonders if it was a perfect shot. In summary, even achieving a critical hit on a boss, it would be impossible to defeat it with just one strike. However, that game had a hidden skill called Perfect Shot. Yet most users have no idea about this ability, and even veterans have opinions about this skill, since no one has ever used that ability, saying that the protagonist not only succeeds in it, but it seemed that every attack was a perfect shot. He becomes suspicious of the protagonist, thinking he was using hacks. However, that was impossible because no one would bother using programs in such a game. Observing the boy's profile, the guy wonders if he plays only that game, but he is surprised to realize that he is new to the platform. Returning to Sangyun, who is still after the bandits, Roman suggests using a short-range weapon because it would be better for hitting them. The boy says he was right. However, Sangyun prefers to use his bow. Roman says he understands and says that if it's the protagonist, he would surely succeed. Sangyun thinks that he has never ridden a horse before and that this was his first time hitting a moving target. Holding his arrow, the protagonist thinks that no matter how much he observes, his hands still tremble, but he cannot give up, firing the arrow and hitting the bandit's nape. His live stream viewers are surprised because he just hit a moving target. The boy thinks he was aiming for the head but ended up hitting the neck, and even though he eliminated him, he did not like it at all. Focused, the protagonist shoots his arrow again, hitting the bandit's head. Roman, seeing what Sangyun had done, can't believe it happened in an instant, saying that he was an incredible archer. The other mercenaries affirm, saying they have never seen anyone with that ability. His viewers are surprised, saying they have never seen the mercenaries act that way, saying the boy had a lot of talent. At the same moment, a donation from an unknown person appears with the name Acorn Jello, saying that shot was incredible. The system informs that he completed the mission successfully. A noble approaches the protagonist, saying that Sangyun did a good job, saying he will remember the boy's name. Observing the message, Sangyun thinks that this was the first time he received a donation, mentioning that that guy must be quite famous because his chat was happy that streamer had appeared. The chat is surprised, telling him to say something because he just received a donation from a streamer. Sangyun is confused because his chat asked him to make a donation. Then the viewers tell him to react using his bow. Then he starts to prepare his arrow, shooting it into the sky. The chat asks why he just shot the arrow, saying that it was nothing special. However, at the same moment, the arrow hits his own head. The viewers start to laugh because they did not expect him to eliminate himself. Exiting the capsule, Sangyun wonders why that arrow ricocheted, mentioning that the capsule was very hot and that it should be because it was from an older generation. The chat, realizing that the live stream had ended, asks why he finished. Then the boy sends a message saying he left because his capsule was too hot. Then the viewers ask him to come back and continue playing. Sangyun thinks that his reactions were better than he thought. He is thoughtful about a comment saying that he had talent, supposing that it should be good for a streamer and that he liked when there was some kind of incident, ending the broadcast. The viewers are surprised because he had just ended the live stream when he received a donation from one of the biggest streamers. Observing the streamer's profile, Sangyun thinks that he was really famous. Watching one of his videos, the boy finds him incredible, saying the other videos were also good, wondering why a streamer like that was in his broadcast. At the same moment, he sends a message to the protagonist. Acorn Jelly was not only a master in KINGDO and AG, but also in a game called All Rounder. He had sent a message to the protagonist saying that he liked him, suggesting they record together someday. Observing the guy's message, Sang-yun thinks about how he would respond, because he was someone who wanted to be known, so it would be a great help if they did a collaboration. Sang-yun reflects that it was difficult because he had no one to help him think. At the same moment, his friend calls him. Juhyuk says that he had just watched his broadcast asking if his name was Almond. Sang-yun confirms, saying it was him. Juhyuk asks what that reaction was when he received the donation, but the protagonist says that he was an archer, so he should remain calm, saying that since he was little, they called him a genius, so he was just using that. The protagonist asks if he called him just to say that, but Juhyuk had something else to say. Actually, he had just resigned. Sang-yun asks why he resigned, and his friend explains that he had fought with his boss, saying that he had put up with him for a long time because he was an idiot. Now from that day on, he would be his manager, and that he was looking forward to working with him, mentioning the first time the protagonist used the capsule. At that moment he saw him, he thought that he really liked archery, and that he also wanted to discover what he liked. Sang-yun says that if he helped him, his career would be ruined, but Juhyuk tells him not to worry, because taking a one-year break would not be a problem, and if it worked out, it would be very good. The boy mentions that he could start working tomorrow, and Juhyuk asks what happened. He is surprised because the protagonist got a collab with one of the biggest streamers of the game. Sang-yun asks if it was really okay with that, and Juhyuk says that they should not miss that opportunity. The protagonist says that he was not good at impressing people, but his friend tells him to leave that to him because he had something in mind. Cutting to a building still in daylight. A girl looks at the protagonist's profile, wondering if she could really meet him at that place. Jelly mentions he chose the boy because he thought he had potential but forgot he was still a star. Then the girl mentions that he almost went crazy when he did a collab with another streamer, leaving the blonde embarrassed. Jelly mentions that his physics was one of the best in the country, and that it would be a good investment to help the boy. The girl asks if he had already met him in person, but is surprised when Jelly says he never saw him. Then she speaks irritated that he could only complain after his broadcast failed. At the same moment, someone arrives asking if he was Jelly. That was the protagonist greeting them and saying his name. They are surprised by the boy's beauty. Then Jelly stands up greeting him and saying his name too. Jae-muk notices another man behind the protagonist asking who he was. That was the friend and agent of our streamer who introduces himself and hands over a card. Seeing Juhyuk's card, they are surprised, because he had already worked in big companies. He says that was nothing special, asking who's the girl next to him. The girl says she was just a manager, but that she did not compare to him, and that she was looking forward to working together. Starting the meeting, Jae-muk mentions that they could see the broadcast sequence on the table, and for the parts that need adjustments, they should discuss. And after some time of discussion and adjustments, they finish the meeting. But before that, Jae-muk wanted to talk about money, however the protagonist interrupts him, saying that he was new in that area and that he would need his help, so for that reason he would not need payment. Jae-muk says that was not necessary, and the girl says they would have a party later. Sang-yun was going to say something, but Juhyuk interrupts him, saying that compensation for them would do well. Then Jae-muk has an idea, suggesting that half of the donations from his broadcast would be the protagonist's. Juhyuk is surprised by his proposal. Sometime after the meeting, Juhyuk says they got half the value of the broadcast, mentioning that he looked at the minimum value of donations from his channel and states that last month it was 2 million. Juhyuk tells the protagonist that he had to deliver something to him, and shows an audio recording of the entire meeting. Sang-yun asks why he needed that, but the guy says it was just for security. Juhyuk mentions the profits, saying that if he earned 300 a month, he only wanted 20% of the additional value. The boy mentions that he was not even earning a minimum wage and questions if it was really okay, but his friend says he had some savings. Sometime later, the protagonist was already at his home starting the live. At the same moment, one of the viewers mentions that he heard rumors of the protagonist having made a deal with Jelly, asking if it was true. Sang-yun thinks that the rumors were already spreading, realizing that there were more people in the live than usual. Thinking that he should not speak for now, he says he knew nothing, and says that today they would go after the leader of the bandits, taking them down at once. However, his chat warns that the bosses do not die with just one shot. But the protagonist is confused because before he had defeated a boss with just one shot. One of the viewers warns that he was not a boss, but an elite mob, saying that a boss was much bigger. Sang-yun thinks that was bad, mentioning that he should not have boasted about killing that mob. At the same moment, a mission appears for the protagonist to kill the boss with one shot. The boy accepts the mission, thinking that even being an impossible mission, that was good because a great reward would reduce the barrier for subsequent donors. At the same moment, several donations start to appear, and the boy thanks everyone, saying he would do his best. Then Sang-yun enters the game, but at the same time, a girl calls him, thanking him for having saved her from the bandits and saying she did not know how to compensate him. Sang-yun thinks that she must be the heroine of the game, mentioning that if he answered wrong, it could change the course of the story. Then 2 response options appear for the boy. One of them was to say that was his job, and the other was asking her to pay him. Then the protagonist chooses the first option, saying that was his job. The girl thanks him, and one of the viewers says that he started playing the game just because of her. But some of the viewers say that Rosanito was much better. Sang-yun thinks that was the name of the second heroine. At the same moment, his captain arrives. Amelia mentions that there was still a chance of bandits in the vicinity, asking Roman to send soldiers, and he says he would do that. Sometime later, the protagonist was already on the mountain watching the bandits. Ronan calls him, whispering that they would approach and attack all at once. Sang-yeon thinks that was more tense than expected, because the sensations he had in the game were almost the same as in real life. At the same moment, the mercenaries begin to attack the bandits. They realize the ambush and wonder where they came from. However, one of the bandits receives a HS as soon as he gets up, and his friend is also eliminated right after. The protagonist continues acting as support, taking down one by one, but they notice the boy and send someone after him. Then the system informs that he completed a condition unlocking a new consecutive shooting ability. Sang-yeon starts using his new skill to test, shooting at the bandits, hitting each one of them. His viewers are surprised while wondering if that ability was not useless. But the boy is happy, saying that the bow was much better than he thought. The viewers are surprised by what he had said, saying he was incredible. At the same moment, he receives another donation asking if the protagonist had a girlfriend. However, the boy is embarrassed, saying he did not have one. Sang-yeon thinks that was fun, and not just for the money, but everything in that game was incredible. Then Roman arrives, saying that Almond was very good, stating that he was not far from being the greatest in the kingdom. Another person makes a donation to the boy, asking why it had ended and where was the boss. The boy remembers that detail, but at the same moment, one of the mercenaries calls the commander, mentioning that that must be the corpse of the boss. Looking at the boss's corpse on the ground, his viewers cannot believe what they were seeing. Sang-yeon is saddened because the mission did not recognize that it was completed. But at the same moment, he receives a donation from Jelly of the same value as the mission, saying it was a perfect shot. The viewers are surprised because Jelly appeared again, and the protagonist asks what this perfect shot was. Jae-mook is sad because he wanted to prove to them that this ability really existed, asking the protagonist to explain it clearly. However, he is surprised when the boy asks what this ability was. Jae-mook sends another donation asking if the protagonist did not know about that skill, and the boy confirms, saying he did not know. Jelly mentions that Sang-yeon used that ability all that time but still did not know what it was, being surprised and asking how much genius he had. Donating once more to the boy, he affirms that the perfect shot really exists and that he would prove it, suggesting recording with him the next day. His viewers mention that the rumors were true about them doing a collaboration. Sang-yeon suggests that he should play calmly, thinking whether he should accept the offer. Then his viewers start saying various things that if he refused, he would be doomed. At the same moment, the boy receives another donation saying that if he proved the existence of that ability, he would donate again. Then Sang-yeon says he would accept the offer. Jae-mook sends another donation thanking him and saying he would get in touch with him. The chat is happy with the collaboration of the two, but Sang-yeon mentions that he already expected that reaction, thinking that Jelly would have to build a story about that ability to increase the hype. His viewers notice that Sang-yeon received more than 100,000 in donation and did not react, but the protagonist mentions that Jelly had already left the live. Sang-yeon thinks that he defeated a boss and also promoted his live, so that was the perfect moment to finish it. Throwing an arrow up again, thanking for the donation, while it falls directly on his head. The boy is relieved because the capsule was very hot, but he is worried, thinking if it would be bad to end the lies, dying, mentioning that he had the feeling it was really affecting him. At the same moment, Ju-yu calls, saying they would meet tomorrow, asking where they should mark. However, Sang-yeon warns that they would talk online, but Ju-yu mentions that they had an agreement, so the two arrange where they would go. Sang-yeon thinks that he should see the reactions of his live, and again his viewers were surprised because he finished the broadcast dying. However, Sang-yeon notices a video they shared of him defeating the boss with just one shot. The comments start to discuss the video, but one of the viewers mentions that everything would be clarified in his collaboration with Jae-mook. At the same moment, someone calls Sang-yeon. Ju-yu asks if he saw the video they posted on YouTube because it had more than 40,000 views. The boy mentions that they did not have an account on that app, but Jae-mook made a video about their collaboration on his channel. Seeing the video of the protagonist defeating the boss, an unknown person asks if that ability really existed. Realizing that even being a novice, he played like a professional. Everyone who saw the video was excited for the day of the collaboration. And the next day, the Corn Jelly's views were the highest on YouTube. We see Jae-mook mention that they were about to start the live and asking if everything was okay with the boy. Usually at the beginning of the broadcast, between 3,000 and 4,000 people are present, so he does not need to appear now. But starting the live, about 10,000 people were watching. The guy is surprised by that number of views. Sang-yeon, watching Jelly, thinks that he interacted with his viewers while waiting for more people to show up. Jae-mook asks who watched the YouTube video, mentioning that they would have a special guest and would do an interview with him. And most importantly, they would prove that the perfect shot ability really existed. Jelly, realizing the number of viewers increasing, says that the boy would introduce himself calling Almond. Then the protagonist introduces himself saying his name. The chat is surprised, asking why he was so beautiful, saying various things about him. Jae-mook says that he was really beautiful, saying that he was also surprised when he saw him. However, the viewers say that it was fake, asking if he was using something to make his face beautiful. Jelly asks if they should start playing or with the interview, but everyone says to start playing. The guy tells them to calm down because they had a guest, and the protagonist is surprised because the chat was moving very fast. Jelly says he received all the opinions, asking if they could start already. and the boy says yes. Jae-mook asks what was the optimization code, leaving the boy confused, asking what that was. The guy is surprised because he did not use a code to optimize his capsule. Sang-yeon asks if that was so important, and Jae-mook thinks he really did not know, not believing that the boy played all that time without optimizing the capsule and wondering if that was even possible. Cutting to the protagonist's friend Joo-hyuk remembers that he forgot to say something to Jelly. He whispers, saying that our hero really does not know since he did not tell him that. Jae-mook says he felt a lot of shame for himself, saying that the protagonist had bought a second-hand capsule and was just playing without knowing anything, leaving the viewers completely surprised. One of the viewers asks if that was why he closed the live suddenly, and the boy confirms, saying that it happened every time he died, but Jelly asks how he managed to keep playing even dying. But the truth is that he never died, but instead shot an arrow at his head. Then the streamer says that he really is a great genius. Convinced, the protagonist says he thought so too. Jelly thinks that boy was a figure everyone wanted to be, mentioning that he had some ease in dealing with people, so he was really suitable for a live broadcast. At that moment, Jae-mook suggests making an optimization code first. Inside the capsule, the protagonist receives the optimization code, thinking that it was faster than he expected. Jae-mook realizes that he finished, and Sang-yeon asks if that was the way the virtual space should be because he did not feel his body, but he affirms, saying that was his conscious world. With a smile on his face, the guy says everything was done, so they should use the perfect shot. Entering the game, Roman says he would explain the objective, saying that Lady Amelia assigned them another mission. A goblin cave is near the farmers, so the group must find it and eliminate them, mentioning that it had been a while since they received a mission like that, telling them to have good results. Jae-mook says he should know how to use the perfect shot, because that game had a vital point system where he imagined a circle in the place he wanted to shoot the arrow, but that was one of the conditions to activate the ability. Sang-yeon asks what was the second condition, but Jelly says it was very difficult, because he would have to succeed in the first condition while fulfilling the other. Looking at Jelly, the protagonist says he can see, leaving the guy surprised by that reaction, since it was as if it meant nothing to him. At the same moment, Jelly takes a punch in the head. Roman asks what he was doing since they had just arrived. Jae-mook apologizes, but the captain tells him not to answer if he doesn't want to be split in half. Angrily, he questions where the mercenary is from. But when he looks at the protagonist, his expression changes completely, and he says they would have a good mission. Sometime later, already in the goblin cave, Jae-mook asks if they were ready to see the perfect shot, but he takes another punch. Roman says that if he wanted help, he should just stay quiet, telling Almond to take the lead and show the newcomer. Sang-yeon was watching the goblins, thinking that now it was easier because his character was optimized and that discomfort disappeared. Then he begins to aim at the monsters, preparing a perfect shot. Jae-mook wonders if he would shoot from that position, thinking that no matter how impossible it was, he would be able to handle it. Then he hits the goblin's head squarely. However, the boy continues shooting and defeating one by one. Jelly thinks that was incredible because he was better than before, where he even adjusted his shot to be quieter in the ambush. Besides, his physique was monstrous. It was as if he was the center of attention, a star of his own show. The system informs that he defeated all the irregular goblins. Roman says he did a good job, leaving Jelly surprised, because where all the mercenaries had to work together, he did everything alone. Jae-mook asks if they saw the perfect shot ability, but the chat says that it was just a headshot and that it was different from just dying. The mercenaries start to set fire to the cave to block the goblins. However, they hear a noise coming from the depths. Those scarlet eyes were watching them. And then a giant goblin appears, scaring the mercenaries. The system informs the protagonist to eliminate the champion goblin. The viewers ask if the protagonist can eliminate it with just one headshot. Already, Roman tells them to get ready. At the same moment, the goblin tries to attack Jelly, who tells Almond to remember the first condition of the ability, saying that it was the perfect moment to use it. But the chat asks why he stopped. However, the protagonist thinks that it was problematic because that goblin had an iron mask, mentioning that the forehead was out of the equation, thinking that he should go to a different place. However, the head was the vital point and the easiest point to hit. At the same moment, Sang-yeon shoots an arrow upwards, leaving the viewers confused, asking if he was wanting to end the broadcast. However, that was not what the protagonist wanted. Then at the same moment, the arrow hits the goblin's nape. Everyone is surprised, asking if he managed to kill it. Then at the same moment, the goblin falls to the ground. Everything goes crazy because that madness that the boy did really work. Then he receives a donation congratulating him for completing the mission. The protagonist thanks for the donation and is bombarded with several others also congratulating him. Sometime later, the boy comes out of the capsule. Jae-mook is happy, saying that he really did it. But the girl mentions that the server was congested, so the broadcast fell, but the guy already knew that, saying it was because of the chat and the donations. Joo-hyuk says he couldn't believe the live ended because of the donations, and if they continue with the interview, they could earn more. Jae-mook tells them to continue. But the protagonist tells them to wait because his head was hurting, but the girl tells them to continue, affirming that he was fine. Then they start the live again. Jelly does his catchphrase while the chat continues euphoric about the used ability. The protagonist mentions that he knew nothing about the perfect shot, but at the same moment, they start receiving several donations and Jelly tells them to wait because he couldn't read them all. Sometime later, Jae-mook continues thanking for the donations. Joo-hyuk is surprised because more than 40 people donated. But there was much more to come, and at the same moment, a viewer donates 1 million, leaving everyone open-mouthed with that amount. Not even his own chat believed it. Jae-mook says it was the first time he saw that. The donor's message mentions that the protagonist was very beautiful, telling him to continue the hard work. Jelly is embarrassed by the guy's message while the protagonist is feeling himself. However, the same viewer sends another donation telling him not to be jealous. Watching the comments, Jae-mook tells them to continue the interview, mentioning that he made a questionnaire with 4 questions. Jae-mook asks what kind of questions were those. Then Sang-yeon answers one of them, saying that he didn't use any skincare, leaving Jelly furious that he was answering that kind of question. The protagonist thinks that it was exciting, mentioning that that was the good part of being a streamer. Sometime after the broadcast ends, the girl says that the capsule was hot because it didn't have a cooling system. However, Sang-yeon says that the capsule at his house was also like that. Sang-yeon asks if everything was okay, then Jae-mook says it would be cool if they broadcast from home. Thanking for the hard work and saying that it was the first time he got those reactions, Joo-hyuk thanks him, handing him a gift. Watching his friend, Sang-yeon thinks that Joo-hyuk was incredible in business. Then Jae-mook picks up a tablet to present the results of the live, leaving everyone surprised because the total was 5 million. Sang-yeon asks if he usually earned all that, but he says no, and that it was the first time he got so much money. And if they split it in half, it would be almost 3 million. The two thank him, but Jae-mook says it wasn't necessary, mentioning that even earning all that was considered a jackpot, saying that it wasn't the main income. Joo-hyuk asks if he could know how he generated income, and the boy says yes, telling him to think that advertising was the main source of income and the revenue was proportional to the visitors. Besides, he brought third-party ads, where most were public game ads or product sponsorships. Joo-hyuk says that it was similar to celebrities, and the girl says he was right, mentioning that beautiful people receive 90% or more of the donations, and since he was like that, there was no other way to act. Watching the protagonist, the girl says it was just her personal opinion, but he really looked like a celebrity. Sang-yeon thanks but says he wanted to be a streamer. The girl says she understands, mentioning that she was just talking about strategies to have more income. Jae-mook says that while they do streaming, it was important to increase external activities, mentioning a man named Horn who did game broadcasts but also did entertainment lives like appearing in the media as a celebrity. For most people on YouTube, that was their main source of income, saying that he could think that the lives were a form of communication. The girl recommends he start doing that, mentioning that they were in the same niche. But in videos, it was important to have an editor because it had a lot of meaning on the platform. Jae-mook asks Joo-hyuk if he has ever done any editing, but the boy says he has no experience in that area. Then Jelly says he should find someone, and Joo-hyuk thanks him for the advice. Sometime later, Jae-mook thanks for the help, saying they would do it again. Jelly thinks the protagonist is way ahead of him, mentioning he is envious. Cutting to the protagonist, Sang-yeon thanks Joo-hyuk for taking him home. However, his friend calls him, saying he seems to be thinking a lot about YouTube, telling him not to rush things, asserting that the boy is talented and no matter what he does, he will end up being successful. Sang-yeon smiles, thanking Joo-hyuk. The boy walks towards his home, saying it's very cold. Remembering that when the stairs were icy, he was worried his grandmother might slip, stating that he earned 2 million that day and his friend didn't take a single cent. Sang-yeon says money is money, but it's a lot of fun, affirming he will continue doing it, saying his hand didn't tremble at any moment. That car accident remains in his memory, not just for him, but for his grandmother too, recalling when she cried in secret. His right arm was more than a bad memory for him. It was a hated presence that caused pain to his grandmother, and yet it was something that accompanied him in everything. But now with that right arm, he can finally use a bow again, saying it's incredible, because now he's surrounded by great people who are helping him. With tears on his face, the boy says it seems like they were sent by his grandmother. Wiping away the tears, Sang-yeon says he will do his best, but maybe it's too late. Remembering his grandmother told him never to say it's too late, and that he should just keep working hard on it. Sang-yeon says it's a pity because she's not there to see it, and that's what he regrets the most. Sometime later, Jae-mook is looking at the comments on his video, saying that was really a perfect shot. Jelly says those reactions were expected, asking if this wasn't the first time a post from that game reached the top 10 of the community, and the girl questions why he was checking that, becoming curious if the video was good, but the boy says it was nothing special. Then the girl says she wasn't talking about the video, but about the editor. Jelly, watching the video, is surprised, saying the protagonist was taking it seriously. It was as if heaven was lending him a hand. We return to the protagonist after taking a shower, thinking he should organize what he would do with yesterday's base. Remembering there were 2 types of models for streamers, he starts talking about all of them, thinking that among them, what he liked the most was being called a celebrity, mentioning that Joo-hyuk had said the same thing as Jelly. Then he thinks he needs to find an editor, and affirms that YouTube brings good revenue but needs good editors, supposing he should look for talents among popular game videos. The protagonist sees a video, thinking that was the trend. being surprised when he realizes it's him in the video. Seeing the name of the channel, the boy remembers that was the person who donated millions last time on the live. Seeing the guy's editing, Sang-yeon thinks it was like a movie, saying even he was surprised by his own gameplay and wondering if it was really him. Observing the comments on the video, Sang-yeon affirms they were all positive, saying he should contact that editor. At the same moment, Ju-hyuk sends a message saying he found an incredible person to edit, asking if he should hire him. Sang-yeon asks how they would hire him since they had little money. However, Ju-hyuk says to leave it to him as it's the manager's job. Then the protagonist says it would be rude not to focus on the game while having such a capable manager. Inside the capsule, the boy thinks he was confident but physically not as good compared to other streamers, affirming the training was essential if he wanted to continue. The system asks what difficulty he wants, and the boy chooses the highest. Sometime later, Sang-yeon says it took 3 hours to finish, saying he was hungry and that it was time to start the broadcast. But before that, he wanted to eat something. Remembering it was time for the reactions from the video collaboration to arrive. About to start the broadcast, Sang-yeon thinks he was a bit nervous. Cutting to a random guy saying he brought that fantasy game for nothing, asserting he knew that game wouldn't have a big commercial success, saying he needed to improve because the expert reviews were very good, suggesting making an event to attract new users, but then realizes he couldn't do that with a game that wasn't selling. The guy wonders how he can revive that game, but then he sees a video of the protagonist, affirming the quality of that video was incredible and the person playing was very skilled, wondering if there was a streamer like that and realizing the boy's account was created a day ago, saying he not only had talent for playing but also for broadcasting and that he was a beautiful person. Watching the protagonist's channel, the guy realizes he started a live. Entering the broadcast, the guy is surprised by the number of viewers because the moment he started the broadcast, 1,000 people joined. Ju-hyuk, watching the boys live, thinks that after breaking the wall of 4,000 people live, he could start doing full-time lives. The viewers are frustrated because the protagonist was quiet, asking what was happening. Sang-yeon remembers that in the collaboration with Jaemook, they got 50,000 views, which meant they managed well, and now he should do everything alone. Then he starts the live, greeting his viewers, affirming they would continue playing. The chat asks why his voice was weird and questions when he would get a camera to show his face. At the same moment, Ju-hyuk sends a message showing a link to the boy, who is surprised when he sees they made an advertisement for him. But he loves it, and Ju-hyuk tells him to turn on the camera. Turning on the face cam, the chat warns that he should always use it in the lives. Then donations start to appear saying the protagonist was very beautiful. Cutting to the boy inside the game, Amelia says she heard about the protagonist's abilities, affirming he easily dealt with the goblins that gave them so much trouble. Sang-yeon mentions he didn't do it all alone. However, the girl takes his hand, saying she heard that from Captain Roman himself, and the viewers are surprised because the girl was very close to him. Then Amelia says she had another mission for him. The protagonist questions if she shouldn't ask the captain first, but Amelia mentions she wished she would do that mission alone. Pointing to a castle in the mountains, the girl says he should go there and kill the lord who commands that fortress. This leaves the protagonist totally scared, asking if he often leaves the castle, but the girl says no, and that he must infiltrate there discreetly. The viewers are surprised because she had practically sent him to die. The girl smiles, saying he would definitely be able to do it. The system asks if he would accept the mission, leaving the boy thoughtful. Yet there was something even worse. The lord of the castle was armed from head to toe. Besides, he was the worst opponent for someone who uses a bow, saying that Almond was really beautiful and skilled, but that wasn't enough for that industry. Then the boy accepts the mission, leaving his viewers surprised for having accepted. Sang-yeon thinks he had an idea, mentioning that if the game was really realistic, medieval castles wouldn't be so huge, and there probably wouldn't be more than 50 people. He wonders why she would give the order to kill someone. And although she is just a character in the game, the girl didn't seem like the type of person who would do that. The protagonist asks if the person in the castle did something wrong. The girl mentions that he was enslaving people as well as lending money and charging high interest to put them in debt. And eventually, they were turned into slaves, including women and children, mentioning that if the lord died, his family could take care of them, and questions if that answers his question. The boy replies yes and heads towards the castle. Sometime later, the protagonist was observing the castle, asking if the game detected him talking to himself. But he says realism was important in that game, heading towards the castle. His viewers are surprised by the protagonist's movement, and the boy says he also noticed a change, because it was thanks to his training. Observing the enemies, the protagonist thinks he got there, but didn't know how he would continue. Noticing there were only 2 guards, but if he attacked carelessly, the other would call for reinforcements. The best option is to kill them silently. However, the protagonist wasn't confident unless he used the bow. But a viewer says it wouldn't work because he would be caught, and questions how you would kill 2 at the same time. At the same moment, Sang-yeon has an idea. Aiming the arrow upwards, the chat asks what he was doing. Looking up, the protagonist thinks he would first aim at the guy on the left. Then he shoots the arrow, hitting both at the same time, leaving his chat incredulous with what had happened. At the same moment, the boy receives a donation, saying now even the game developers would believe that, returning to the random guy he thinks he didn't expect this, asserting he worked at numerous companies and saw many players, however he never saw anyone like him. At the same moment, he receives a call. The person on the call suggests scheduling a meeting the next day, saying they would send the streamers details. Returning to the protagonist, who had already climbed the tower, still thinks it was really difficult, asserting the game was hell except for the bow part, but the chat says that was the hardest part, asking if he practiced before going there. The boy confirms, saying he practiced on the highest difficulty, and that he repeated it several times. Then Sangyun suggests removing the bodies from that place. At the same moment, one of the guards approaches, asking what had happened to the guards who were in that place. However, he didn't expect the protagonist to be aiming at him. Defeating the guard, the chat says that ambush was incredible. Then he hides the bodies in a corner, but one of the viewers says that from there it would be more difficult because there would be more enemies. Sangyun says he was right, asking what he should do now. Wearing the guard's clothes, the boy thinks it was more uncomfortable than he thought. Entering the house, Sangyun thinks that must be the closet, supposing there should be more arrows there. But one of the guards notices the boy, asking what he was doing. At the same instant, the guard takes an arrow to the head, leaving the viewer surprised. Then another guard appears, and the chat says he was located. Sangyun thinks it was nostalgic because it reminded him when he competed with people. At that moment, the protagonist didn't hear anything because he was totally focused on his target. And from there, things got easier because it was simply hit or miss. That was the only outcome he had in that world. Crossing such an extreme fork in the road definitely made him stronger. While running, the chat says he was making too much noise, but the boy doesn't notice because he was very focused. At the same moment, a guard notices the protagonist. Then Sangyun hits an arrow in the guy's foot, leaving the chat surprised for having missed an arrow. However, that was the boy's plan. Gaining distance from the guards, he aims at them again, hitting the head of all. Sangyun thinks everything was done, so he should enter the castle. As he enters the castle, the guards notice him and call for reinforcements. At this moment, Sangyun was completely surrounded, and the viewers ask what he would do. Then the guards start to go after him. But Sangyun shoots arrows one by one, and at the same moment, the system informs that he received a new ability. Sangyun already starts using the new ability, taking many arrows at once, hitting several guards consecutively. The guards are confused, asking what was happening because all the shots were in the head. Desperate, they call the protagonist a monster and tell everyone to run. However, when the guard looks back, Sangyun was already behind him, hitting the remaining guards. His viewers are surprised by what the boy had done and start donating to him. Sangyun thinks the donations have started to come in, wondering if his life is going well. Then now he should kill the Lord. Opening the door, the protagonist stands before the boss. He questions if that was the Lord because he thought he was a fat man, but he definitely looked like a boss. At the same moment, the boss throws his sword at the boy, asking if he was alone. Aiming his arrow at the boss, Sangyun thinks he had incredible strength to be able to throw his sword from that distance. But the boy is surprised because that armor was impeccable. Then the boss calls his guards, who also had armors covering their bodies. Sangyun thinks the boss's sword would help, but wonders if it would be a good time to test a new weapon. But he says it wouldn't be a good idea because he has played the game enough to know. Every game has its way of completing missions. Sangyun watches the guards closely, then notices something. At the same instant, one of the guards attacks the boy, but he dodges, hitting an arrow that removes the guy's helmet. Then he starts removing all the helmets while dodging the attacks. When all the guards' heads were exposed, Sangyun shoots again, defeating them in moments. Sometime later, the protagonist finishes, defeating all the guards where only the boss was left. Then the boss gets up and heads towards the boy, who thinks the 3 headshot conditions have been met and now he just needed to check. Watching his hand, an aura begins to emerge. Then the system informs that the consecutive shot ability has been activated. This ability gives him more arrows. Then the boss asks if he wanted to kill him with just a bow and arrow, but the protagonist says he found a way. Shooting an arrow into the boss's chest, he asks if the boy still hadn't understood, saying it was useless, saying he would grind the protagonist for causing a mess in his castle, but at the same instant receives another arrow in the same place. The boss is confused, asking what he was doing. Then he starts receiving several arrows, asking the protagonist if he thought that would have an effect. Focused, Sangyun thinks he should go faster, noticing that the armor began to wear out. At the same instant, the boss starts to advance on the boy. Sangyun thinks that still wasn't enough, hitting an arrow again in the same place, but this time it worked and took a chip off the armor. The boss asks how he did that, but he didn't expect what was coming, receiving an arrow directly in the chest, leaving all the viewers surprised because the protagonist managed to defeat a boss with just a bow and arrow. All this high difficulty training and all this schedule, all of it was worth it. Sangyun thanks for the donations and asks what was this thing about being an ally that one of his donors said. The boy says he didn't count, but it seems he shot 40 times, and the chat says he was now really a streamer. Since they finished everything, the boy suggests going to see Amelia's face. However, he receives a donation of 300,000 saying he was very cool. Cutting to a girl on a subway, she thinks those people were very annoying, asking how long she would be taken like that. And instead of embracing that wave, she could just fall into the void. Entering her house, the girl realizes the protagonist's life had already started. Even though at first she only watched him because of his name, now this is her only joy. Seeing the mission the boy was on, she wonders how he would do that. but she is surprised because he really accepted and was willing to complete it. When she sees that Sangyun managed to complete that mission, the girl is amazed because he really cleared the castle, and she wonders if she should really donate to him. While donating 100,000, she writes her message, but she thinks she should put more money, asserting she didn't want to lose to anyone in donations, saying she spent a lot of money, but it was for her happiness. Seeing the donation, the girl is happy because the protagonist remembered her, asking what reaction he would make for her. Sangyun is thoughtful, questioning what reaction he could make. At the same instant, he does a backflip. Sometime later, Sangyun ends the live thinking that if he didn't disconnect at that moment, he would die while being happy that he won 300,000. Remembering that was the same donor who donated millions in the collaboration with Jemuk, wondering what these people do for a living. Worrying because he thinks they were just young people who donate such a large amount to streamers. Returning to the girl, she says the broadcast was a lot of fun, saying she should make a clip of that. Watching the clip, she wonders what music she could use, thinking that the content of that day was incredible and an excellent visual story, mentioning that he played better than before, asserting that as he continues to grow, she would continue to strive to improve the edits, happy saying the next clip would be epic. Returning to the protagonist who was answering a call from Juhyuk. Sangyun asks why he called him so early, and his friend warns that they had a problem, asking if he remembered that person who made the montage of that video, mentioning that her account was actually private. The protagonist asks what they should do now, and Juhyuk suggests mentioning them when donating next time. However, Sangyun didn't want it that way. Then he asks if they should wait even if it takes a long time, and the protagonist agrees. Looking at his cell phone, Sangyun thinks that when you are full of thoughts, the best way to end that was by cleaning the house. The boy thinks he goes up and down the stairs every day, affirming that it was very tiring. But he recomposes himself, saying that it was training because everything is difficult until it becomes familiar. Then when the boy was going down the stairs, someone opens the door in his face. With the protagonist hurt, the girl apologizes, asking if he was okay. Sangyun says he was fine, but the girl watching the protagonist is surprised when she sees who it was. The boy is confused, asking if she was okay, saying he would leave. Sometime later, Sangyun takes out the trash, saying that sweating makes him feel good, and at that moment, he receives a call. Juhyuk calls him again, telling him to check out the new video from that person because it was incredible. The video had just been posted and already had more than 3,000 views, mentioning that he was trending in the gaming category in 78th place. Juhyuk warns that he left a comment as soon as the video was released, saying that now they just have to wait for her to respond. At the same moment, someone calls the boy. Looking at the girl, he realizes she was the same person from before. Sangyun asks if she had forgotten something, but the girl says that wasn't it. Embarrassed, she asks if she could have an autograph from the protagonist, leaving the boy confused, wondering if she could be a fan of his. Surprised because he wasn't even famous, and that he found a fan near his home. The boy says he would make an autograph and asks when her name was, but finds out she was the person the protagonist most wanted to meet. Sometime later, the protagonist was in a coffee shop. The protagonist's friend asks the girl if she had ever been involved in video work before, and she says yes, because it was her job and hobby. Juhyuk says that was incredible because she worked with her hobby, mentioning that they had been looking for her all that time and never expected to find her that way. Jaya asks if she could know why they were looking for her, but the guy says it was nothing serious, putting some papers on the table and asking her to work with them. But this leaves Sangyun surprised because he prepared all that very quickly. Noticing the girl's hesitation, Juhyuk mentions there were some problems with the revenue from her videos. He thinks that usually when people start discussing collaboration, they get curious about the profits, but that girl showed no sign of interest, asserting he thought she was just a rich kid, but she donated to the protagonist just because she liked him, asking if her videos were just because she was a fan. Then the guy thinks of a way to hire her, saying the protagonist needed her help to edit his videos. Sangyun asks what he was talking about, but Juhyuk whispers, telling him to wait. The girl is embarrassed, asking if he really needed her. After the incident, the businessman informs that he will be contacting the girl again as soon as he receives a response from the punk. However, she questions about the videos she posted on her channel, and the man explains that they will probably need to be sent to the official channel. In this case, the girl asks to be notified when everything is finally decided. With the end of the negotiation, the protagonist nudges the man with his elbow. He asks if this streamer partner business is serious, and the man assures he is not a liar, commenting irritably that he has no reason to lie. Faced with this fact, the hero is impressed by such a large company wanting him, and the employee in turn asks if the boy will sign the contract, which he confirms. As they walk, the man in the suit says that Jaya is very cool and straightforward, and being a fan of the boy made him think recruiting her would be easier. However, the protagonist explains that being a fan is completely different from being in a contract with one's idol. But even so, the man recalls that she donated a lot of money, meaning she really likes you even though she seems serious and cold. Thinking about it, the girl did not smile once during the entire conversation, but be that as it may, it is better to work with her in the future as she is a professional. Upon arriving home, the girl quickly closes her bedroom door and stays leaning against it for some time. Without wasting time, she begins to say goodbye to her cap and jacket, then gets under the blanket in her bed. Hidden and sheltered by the blanket, the girl now shows her feelings, thinking it is already a dream to see Almond in person, but she even managed to become an editor. As she looks at that contract, she thinks it is hard to believe, but in the end, it is not a dream. In her past, the girl remembers being mocked for being a graduate of a community college. The men maliciously questioned her about what she would do after leaving that place, pointing their fingers at her and asking if she thinks she will find a place where she will be treated as well as they treat her. Faced with this, the girl thought she would be stuck in this routine forever, but one day she ended up being recognized by someone. The video quality was no joke. It was the genius archer who descended like a god and the genius creator who rose from the ground. That archer took over the castle alone, being a certain Almond, so at that time the girl remained anxious for the next video. Somehow, she felt a strange but comforting sensation she had never felt before. When he gets home, the protagonist thinks he should start a little earlier that day as he will be streaming at a random time. After logging into his computer, a notification different from the others catches his attention. It's a file of the introduction music sent in a zip file by Seojia. It is informed that just following the instructions sent with the file will install it, and the hero, in turn, thinks they separated just a short time ago. However, in this short period, the girl did everything quickly, so when he asks her in the chat, Seo explains she is already doing little by little as a hobby. In this case, you get really excited to see everything she can do when she puts her maximum effort into work. Finally, the hero thanks her, saying he will use the music well, which makes the girl extremely happy. In an instant, Almond starts broadcasting his live stream, and little by little, the message begins to reach the mobile devices of his followers in the city. Quickly, a crowd of people begins to join the live, happy that the protagonist started earlier. They then realize there is an introduction, and in the interaction chat, they comment it is quite cinematic. Continuing, the followers notice that this intro is very much like Seojia and conclude that the girl was recruited. Thus, the numbers go up more and more, and finally it is time for the true star to present himself. After his first speech, a subscriber donates 1,001, asking if today they will finally see Amelia's surprised face. Then another donates another 1,000 saying hello, and the protagonist thanks for the donations, saying they will start the era of the kingdom immediately. Materializing inside the game, the subscribers comment that the bodies from the previous day are still there, noticing the place did not get better after the break. It is said that the man destroyed the castle alone with no witnesses, possibly being a murder. Now the hero informs he needs to report everything to Amelia, but before that, there is something to do. Honestly, since he cleaned the place alone, he believes it is good to loot some items, and his subscribers readily agree with the idea. In this case, he questions himself about which one to take among 3 bows on the ground, creating a doubt among the viewers. Next, Yu opens a chest full of gold coins, surprised by the shine they emit. Additionally, a new armor is also received, which definitely excites the hero. After collecting the items, the protagonist walks around the place and explains to his subscribers that this is the most he can carry due to the weight limit. At least now, it is certain that the boy will no longer die in a single blow in most confrontations. Mounting his horse, he says it's time to complete the mission. After some time, the game returns to a daytime setting, and the hero is relieved that the passage of time is not realistic. Dismounting his horse, suddenly someone calls out to our hero. It is the princess, who is impressed to see Almond right in front of her. It promptly bows towards the princess as a sign of respect, and she asks how he managed to return so early. Then the hero explains to his lady that he came to update her on the mission. In this case, the girl explains to her servant that she needs to speak with the warrior privately for a moment, asking her to leave them alone. Seeing this, she tells the hero to resolve everything quickly, making him understand that he cannot waste time. So the two head towards a door entering a building. As they walk, the princess asks if Almond has changed his mind about what she had said. However, Yu says no, stating that he has just come to report the conclusion of his mission. Faced with this, the girl is in disbelief as it had only been 2 days since she had entrusted this task to the warrior. In this case, the protagonist counts on his fingers that 1 day was for going and returning, half a day to prepare for the attack, and half a day to raid the place. However, the girl still cannot believe what the hero is saying. But she realizes she heard something about a raid and reminds the protagonist that her request was for an assassination. About this, with a straight face, he explains that the security was very tight, so he just killed everyone in his path. After hearing this, the girl's expression quickly shifts from innocent confusion to factual despair. After composing herself from what she just heard, the princess prepares to ask her questions. In this case, she asks if Talorant's castle is now completely vacant, and the hero confirms, saying there is no one there. With a warm expression, the girl asks again how the protagonist managed to conquer the castle without anyone's help. However, for him, this was an easy task, not understanding the reason for the surprise. Then the princess says there is no need to delay any longer. In this case, to protect the people there, they from the territory of Generate must reach the place quickly, so she asks to prepare the carriage. She informs her servant that she is going to Talorant's castle, explaining that they must arrive before the other nobles exert their influence. Quickly, the girl gets into the carriage and one of the servants asks her to be careful on her mission. However, the boy not moving until now was something that left her confused. She then calls his attention, asking if he will just stand there lost in thought. Thus, she calls the hero to join her as she has many questions about Almond. Faced with this, the viewers go wild due to the girl's sympathy for our hero, even considering a romantic relationship between the two. With the carriage on its way, the girl asks how the man can be so powerful. In view of this, the boy comments that it is a bigger compliment than he deserves because in his mind he does not believe he is that powerful. However, the girl, still surprised, comments that she has seen many knights in her life, but none of them have achieved as many feats as our hero. Yu in turn explains that he is good at shooting arrows, but the girl finds it unbelievable that he could defeat all the castle's troops with just that. Then the hero confirms, and she, like the viewers, is left not understanding anything. She comments that Almond is fascinating because she has never seen a knight who insists on using a bow, so the boy explained that he is actually a mercenary. In this case, understanding the boy's true job, she asks the warrior a question. She asks if the boy wouldn't be interested in becoming a knight after the task is completed. In a shy way, she explains that she needs someone to manage Talorant's castle since it will be incorporated into a new territory. The girl asks, saying it is just out of curiosity, and the stream chat goes crazy, considering both a romantic route and the possibility of becoming a knight. Everyone was curious about the hero's response, but he said tediously that he would only be a mercenary without the skills to be a knight. At that moment, the girl was a bit disappointed and didn't know what to say. She explained that her father mentioned he would like to see the boy in person. In this case, it is likely that he is satisfied with how the hero handled the recent situation, which surprises the boy since it concerns the Count. When the hero was about to say something, the girl placed her finger against his mouth, saying he is not aware. This situation creates a rather warm scene between the two. With an embarrassed appearance, the girl continues, saying it is a lady's courtesy to ignore all these things. Finally, the mood is cut short when they are informed that they have reached their destination, but the chat cheers with love for the character and her development. Inside the castle, several workers are helping with cleaning and reconstruction. Among them, one notices the presence of important new visitors in the region. He wonders who they are and guesses they might be citizens of Talorant. However, the girl overheard the conversation and stated that the man is wrong. She declared them as citizens of Jinrit, which leaves everyone on the site extremely surprised. They consider expelling them, but know they don't have the strength to do so since Talorant was eliminated and understand that making this decision will bring consequences. Yu, while walking along the castle's parapet, notices that people are still confused. He finds a banner symbolizing Talorant's territory. At that moment, the two allies look at each other, already understanding what needs to be done. Then the princess holds that immense red flag with her hands, and removes it from the site in a symbolic act, thus raising the flag of her own region at the top of the castle. The citizens, in turn, are indignant because their lord simply changed overnight. They comment among themselves that it's a bit anticlimactic, but decide to continue their work, and one of them comments having heard that Jean's governance is much better. In this case, the protagonist questions if it is okay to leave everything as it is, and the princess asks what the hero means by that. Then he explains, exemplifying that a speech should be made for them to know their lords. Thus, the girl is radiant with the protagonist's proposal. However, she explains that everything is already in order because the territory's people will certainly adapt soon, which leaves the viewers fascinated by the scene. A week later, things began to move forward in the region. The territory's people, who were previously drowning in debt and on the verge of being sold into slavery, now they could pay their debts through work, and they were allowed to possess a certain amount of money. As a result, the amount of work increased naturally, and the once dark and lifeless territory began to enjoy vitality. In the long run, this would likely produce much greater benefits for the territory. Inside the castle, interrupting his thoughts, the girl touches the hero's shoulder. With love and kindness, the princess is happy to have found Almond, and the stream chat is intrigued by the strange atmosphere between the two. Then the girl reiterates, asking if the boy remembers that they will see her father the next day. Promptly, the protagonist confirms not having forgotten, and the viewers go wild due to the romantic atmosphere. Yu, in turn, is happy to be having such a happy ending. However, as if in karma, trumpet sounds are suddenly heard throughout the region. At this moment, the two turn around, surprised, understanding that this sound signals conflict. Where the horizon begins, an abnormal amount of troops is positioned to retake the territory. Among the soldiers, one stands out wearing golden armor and presenting a dangerous countenance. In this case, Yu questions if they could be Talorant's ally families, and the girl confirms, explaining that they probably came to retake the castle. Then the hero assures that he can stop them, and the princess holds her dear companion's hand, asking with all she has that he returns safe and sound. Shortly before the war begins, Jinrit's territory flags are raised in great numbers, and quickly, the soldiers' general indicates a formation, also giving a motivational speech that today they will defend Talorn's fortress, thus protecting the honorable Lady Jinrit who provided jobs for everyone there. In a war cry, it is said that they will definitely win the battle, and all the soldiers are immensely motivated by the words spoken. Everyone except Almond, who cannot stop looking at Jean at the top of the castle with sorrow. However, he knows his commitments, changing his expression, and then a mission appears asking the hero to bring victory in this war. With the war cry being launched, everyone goes wild, including the chat, which is surprised by the large-scale event that resembles a top-tier game. The chat comments about another streamer who couldn't achieve a third of what the protagonist did, and he notices this toxicity. So wisely, he asks them not to mention other content creators in his stream, which they end up agreeing with. Anyway, they praise the quality of Almond's stream, which is improving day by day. However, he suddenly breaks everyone's expectations, informing that he will end the live stream at this moment and thanking everyone for watching. The viewers beg the hero not to end the stream, but he doesn't give it much importance and thus closes the live. After finishing, he looks at the numbers on his phone, extremely satisfied. And judging by the viewers' reactions, everything indicated that our hero ended the stream at the right time. The moment to decide to end the game's story is very important. Although it may disappoint the views, in the long run it becomes beneficial. Reading the comments, the protagonist notices many interesting posts. Some were about how to maximize affection with Amelia, all just by conquering a castle alone. At least that's what was being commented on. However, the compliments regarding himself and his skills were something he couldn't understand, thinking he had done just a normal gameplay. In the protagonist's mind, he believes a pro player could easily surpass his achievements and wonders if there wasn't any professional archer in the game. However, at that moment, another thought comes to Yu's mind. He remembers his friend talking about his ability to concentrate instantly, so the boy finally considers that he might indeed have some talent for games. In this case, he questions if it is due to his high concentration, remembering that archery requires this but doesn't mean it's exclusive to archers. Excited, the hero looks for other popular posts currently. Suddenly, he finds something important, an analysis of his character's archery skills. In the article, they highly praise the protagonist's skills and affirm their confidence in his posture and position process, making it a very detailed report. And judging by the content, it is clear that these men are definitely not amateurs in their work. Then at this moment, a piece of information ends up shocking the hero. In the article, people comment that even comparing Almond's skills as a professional, he still performs better. To justify this, the report was given by a former trained player. In this case, the hero starts trembling, wondering who this person could be because if they are archers, he will probably know who it is. After some time of fretting, Yu decides to let it go and rest a bit. He realizes there is no reason to worry about it because there is nothing particularly interesting. Moreover, he knows that people in the archery field cut ties with him about 10 years ago, yet the doubt of it being someone known remains. The reason the protagonist stopped being an archer was due to an injury from an accident, and until then, no one knew about it except for his coach. In the past, the hero remembers a day when he was leaving school and was called by a girl. Very nervous, she asked if it would really end that way. Then the boy stated he no longer found archery fun, and the girl questioned if it was just fun for him. At that time, it was a fact that if he didn't become an archer, no one else could, as everyone was under his leadership. In this case, she asked why the boy was giving up so suddenly and questioned if he was serious. Unfortunately, to the girl's disappointment, the protagonist confirmed he was serious, and then the girl refused to lament further, understanding there was no turning back. That day, she parted from the boy, beginning to cry, thus wishing him to leave. However, unexpectedly, she was not the only person to cry that day. In his home in the morning, notifications keep arriving on the hero's phone, asking about the streamer. While descending some stairs, the protagonist notices a few negative posts, but in a moment of low audience, he still appreciates the posts. Suddenly, Yu ends up accidentally meeting the girl. He greets COG, and she responds to Mr. Sangyan. The girl then comments that she notices the hero is working very hard, and he says the same to her, asking if she's going somewhere. It is informed that her destination is nearby, and in this case, Yu asks if he can accompany her, which she accepts, surprised. Additionally, it is said that Seo also had something she wanted to show him. After walking a bit, they finally rest in a park in front of a pond. In an act of chivalry, our hero bought 2 drinks and gave one to the girl. Without further ado, Yu asked what the girl wanted to show him, so she pulled out her phone, explaining that it wasn't anything too important. She showed the protagonist that she had completed some new videos to post on the channel, asking him to take a look. In this case, Yu promptly accepted, praising the production speed and asking if he was the first to watch, which she confirmed. While watching, the girl remained embarrassed in the corner, and back to the video. The title of the first episode of Kingdom Age was quite catchy. Looking at the video, the hero noticed it was a video of his first live stream. In a nostalgic feeling, he remembered choosing the bow among several other weapons, ignoring the difficulty system and his subscribers. However, he proved to be quite competent with the bow and arrow, surprising those who had previously criticized him. The screen transitions were quick to match his shooting speed, so there was no reason to be nervous about anything. It's a fact that the girl did a very competent job because besides showing his best moments, she also sensed with the viewers' reactions. In this case, the hero looked at his avatar in the video on the girl's phone, saying it was insane. Embarrassed, the girl asked the protagonist's opinion about her work. Then you said it was a surprisingly good artistic job. After that, he didn't mince words in praising all the details the girl managed to include, making her even more embarrassed. In the end, all she could say was a simple thank you for used words. Changing the subject, he asked if she could post it on YouTube right then, and she replied that she couldn't yet. She mentioned having heard that the best launch strategy is to post at least 3 videos at once. In this case, she said that if it was okay, she could continue producing in this style, to which the hero agreed, already thanking her. Later at home, Siu lay on her bed, sighing with exhaustion. However, just remembering Yu's compliments, her energy recharged again, understanding that she was doing something worthwhile. At that moment, she felt the comforting sensation of being recognized for her work. But suddenly, her phone rang, interrupting that moment of pleasure. However, Siu knew that no one would message her at this hour of the night, so she thought it might be something from Almond, which made her extremely anxious. Unexpectedly, the message was not what she was expecting, thus changing the whole atmosphere to something darker, making her throw her phone away. At that moment, she thought it would be better to take a shower as she still had a lot to do, and that message on her phone appeared to be from someone named Psychopathic Bastard. With the start of another day, this one is special because it is the day Almond will have siege content. It is said that Yu is the world's first archer to undertake a siege challenge. On some forums, people agree, and one of them comments that he can hardly wait, informing that he will definitely watch after school. Another agrees and says he will also watch but on his way home from work. However, suddenly a notification appears to everyone that Almond started his livestream, surprising everyone since the hero started 4 hours earlier than expected. With a happy expression, the protagonist greets his fan community and everyone responds, but some of them question what's happening. Our hero thinks he was a bit worried about the strange time he decided to start his stream, but there were even more people than the previous day. In this case, he understands that he is starting with a great audience, which is due to the siege challenge he will undertake that day. After that, he informs that the day's stream will be longer and finally starts playing from where he left off last time. Then one of the soldiers calls his attention, asking if he traveled a long way to get there. However, our hero appears to be confused and the soldier points to the girl on top of the castle. In this case, he says the hero is pretending not to understand and friendly gives the protagonist a light punch on the shoulder, saying he is jealous. At that moment, the stream chat is confused because this side of Roman had never been shown before and Yu thinks the man was already friendly but had never interacted like this. Then, looking at the horizon, the protagonist understands that the man is the type who likes to command from behind to bring them down. And with the sound of the trumpet by a soldier, the battle finally begins, awakening the fury of the degenerate soldiers. Quickly, being mounted on their horses, the allied group faces the invading enemy group. Then our hero, managing the archers, commands them to shoot. Thus, the order is precise, with several enemies being hit by the protagonist's command. Suddenly, a system message appears asking if he would like to transfer command to the NPC, which he ends up accepting. It is said that the troops will continue with basic combat automatically, and Yu comments with the chat about what Roman said, which is to kill the Golden Knight in return. Then suddenly, a subscriber donates 10,000 won, requesting a mission to kill one person to access the money. In this case, the protagonist is impressed by the simplicity of the imposed mission, which his subscribers agree with, understanding that the donor is underestimating him. At that moment, the donor comments that no matter what happens in this chaotic situation, 20 people will be the limit, and Yu, in turn, asks if the man is sure about this. In this case, the hero believes the man must be rich, and everyone in the chat asks him to accept, already claiming victory that at least 50 deaths will occur. Later, our protagonist walks across the battlefield, now making sure to stay silent. In stealth mode, he was entering enemy territory alone, consequently abandoning his allies and deviating from the mission. Almond thinks that drawing aggro alone with such confidence will only raise the stakes, but it is obvious that he must also take on the missions. As his friend said in the gaming stream, donations are usually not as expected, so each one is important. Hidden behind a bush, Yu believes he has about 80 arrows and understands that if he kills at least one with each arrow, he could receive about 1 million won. It is said that there is a special aspect to a donation mission, which is that they contribute greatly to the flow's rhythm. In his mind, Almond understands that it is not just about assassinating the enemy leader and finishing, but also about the prolonged fight, which will make the flow more fun. On the main battlefield, things were going as expected, with enemy soldiers heading towards the conflict. However, suddenly a rain of arrows hit several members of that army. Seeing this, one of the soldiers shouted, informing that they were being attacked from the left. However, when looking to that left, there was no indication that the arrows had come from that position. At that moment, one of the highest-ranking warriors approached, saying they couldn't waste time with just a single arrow. But as he was about to give the order to continue advancing, an arrow hit his skull, finishing him off immediately. And amid that chaotic atmosphere, the soldiers called for their sergeant, not understanding what was happening. In that group of soldiers, confusion took over everyone, and at that moment, the chat understood why the hero had come alone. Tracking the trajectory of a single arrow is very difficult to do, especially when all the same arrows hit their targets precisely. After another shot is hit, the warriors finally understand the protagonist's position in the southwest behind a bush. Then their leader orders 20 soldiers to protect the left flank, impressing the stream chat with the NPC's ability to lead everyone alone. In this case, they question what Almond is doing, asking him to run, but the hero is calmly counting his arrows. After counting, he plants the 20 arrows in one spot on the ground. And finally, the warriors approach the protagonist's location with their swords drawn, ready to attack. Seeing this, he comments to his subscribers that there are 20 of them, so he will prepare exactly 20 shots, which fascinates the viewers with his overwhelming confidence. Walking towards the bush, the warriors look around anxiously, searching for the hidden enemy. However, suddenly one of them noticed that two of his colleagues were instantly hit by an arrow, leading to their immediate death. With his colleagues on the ground, he barely has time to think and ends up with the same fate as the others. Not just for those three, this fate repeats with all the warriors who approach the protagonist's position. One of them shouts, trying to warn that the archer is just aiming for the head. But as his message was being passed, he too ends up being hit. Without mercy, Almond launches a rain of arrows that hit their targets with surreal precision, and the system informs there are 3 seconds until the consecutive shot ends. However, those 3 seconds were more than enough for the protagonist to finish off everyone in the region. Finally, the allied troops are already approaching on the horizon, but now without enemies to stop them. With the end of the mission, the hero understands he has earned 230,000 won, and the viewers praise him greatly for doing exactly as he said. At her home behind the computer screen, Siu is extremely excited, unable to stop praising Almond for his remarkable skills. She thinks that everyone, like her, is enamored with the hero, and this is because he always performs at 100% regardless of the situation. That passion demonstrated aligns closely with his sense of self-confidence. Yu is definitely someone who does not doubt himself because he doesn't need to. This is an idea based not just on belief, but rather on his previously fully proven success. Back in the game, the hero hits another soldier with a precise shot to the skull. And for everyone, it is already a fact that the protagonist is the true image of a genius to which people aspire. Our hero points an arrow at his enemies, and now he ends up reaching a record of 40 consecutive kills, with comments stating that this is also a form of assassination as there are no survivors. After taking down a few more enemies, the protagonist realizes he has about 40 arrows left. Then suddenly, the knight in golden armor appears, and the chat can't help but comment that this warrior is very naive to appear in a place like this. Seeing the situation, he thinks it's unbelievable because all 20 of his men were taken down by a single archer. In this case, the warrior orders 40 more soldiers to the front, not allowing the archer to kill any more of his men. Promptly, they all head to the designated spot. Upon arriving at the location, they finally come face to face with the protagonist hidden behind a bush, and the mission donor asks in the chat for the hero not to cause any more losses. However, the bet was already made, and the chat comments that the donor is crying a lot for someone who has more than 1 million in their account. Seeing this, he was amazed by the size of his subscriber's wealth, already imagining he will do very well. At that moment, the hero asks if this is true to his subscriber, and he responds only that he's in trouble. Thus, it is implied that the donor indeed has such a fortune. Then, aiming again with his bow and arrow, the hero states that he will take exactly that million his supporter has in his account. That subscriber tries to say something, but at the same moment, one of the soldiers is hit in the head with a precise arrow. Seeing this, the warriors try to form up to counter the attack. However, the protagonist activates his consecutive shot ability, now greatly diminishing his enemy's chances. Quickly, he targets everyone in front of him, defeating the warriors one by one. In this case, the mission donor logically starts to worry. With more and more shots, Almond misses none, hitting all right in the vital spot of the skull. But suddenly, hidden in another bush, a noise is heard from someone. This person shot an arrow that narrowly missed the hero, making the chat realize that the enemy side also has their own archer. Seeing this, the viewers try to give tips to the hero. However, he pays attention only to the game, trying to find his enemy. After another arrow lands close to his foot, the protagonist finally manages to track the enemy's location. Thus, he shoots an arrow that intercepts the opposing warrior's arrow, leaving everyone extremely impressed. At that moment, the enemy archer just wonders what just happened, but before he can react, he takes an arrow to his right eye. In this way, he falls to the ground lifeless, causing shock and despair among his companions. Finally, only a few soldiers remain on the battlefield, already understanding the cruel fate that awaits them. Then the hero takes another arrow from his quiver, preparing to finish them off. And aiming at his enemies, he comments to the chat that after these kills, the accumulated value is already 710,000 won. Not wanting to accept what's happening, one of the soldiers grips his sword handle tightly. In an act of desperation, he rushes towards the archer to try to avenge his comrades. However, as he gets closer, he is noticed by the protagonist's peripheral vision and ends up being hit as well. One of the warriors despairs, questioning who this bastard is because he has never seen anyone so quick with a bow and arrow. But at that moment, another is hit. The warrior's comrade falls right in front of him, interrupting his speech and leaving him even more agonized. As his last instinct, he tries to run to save his life, but our hero has no intention of letting that happen. However, things did not go as expected. Looking at his baggage, he realized he was out of arrows, but his subscribers were already very satisfied with the performance he had shown. The donor then felt relieved for not having to spend even more money, and others commented that the NPC was just lucky. But now the focus turned to the soldier in his frantic run. Unexpectedly, our hero was pursuing him, not willing to let his unbeatable score be broken this way. With the soldier's desperation upon realizing he was being chased, the viewers only praised the quality of Kingdom Age's artificial intelligence. That warrior kept shouting for the protagonist to stop chasing him, and at that moment, he found an arrow in one of the bodies on the ground. He pulled it from the head of a fallen soldier and aimed at his new target. Hitting him precisely in the skull, he finished his combat with a perfect score. Smiling, you explained to his subscribers that only 20 people were left. Understanding his promise, the donor sent that promise 1 million, driving everyone crazy, and the very happy hero thanked awkwardly. Suddenly, something on the horizon caught our protagonist's attention. It was the arrival of the Allied troops, indicating that the war had come to an end. Amid the crowd of soldiers was the knight Robern, being acclaimed by all. One of the warriors commented that thanks to Sir Robern's leadership, they won the battle, praising him for being truly remarkable and the real hero. Seeing this, the viewers were indignant at this unfair merit system, commenting that Almond was the one who did all the work. Inevitably, he agreed, thinking he had killed 100 of them, without receiving the proper recognition. In this case, Roman approached, apologizing for his colleague's behavior. With his somewhat embarrassed appearance, he informed that the way they treat mercenaries is unequal. The protagonist then questioned if there was a problem with their relationship with others. In response, Roman explained that the knights only call mercenaries to get the basic payment and leave as soon as possible, despite their significant contributions. Faced with the situation, the knight appeared while the mercenary was complaining and asked if that was what he was dissatisfied with. He questioned if there was anything wrong with giving the agreed value beforehand. Roman in turn explained that there was clearly a clause for additional rewards when they performed well. Seeing this, Robert mockingly questioned what was said about executing the mission well. He commented that on the battlefield, where knights are fighting for their lives, mercenary units showing some performance is unlikely. He added that mercenaries fight while protecting their bodies, using the excuse that it is their only asset. After such an insult to his person, Roman became deeply irritated, and the knight only asked what was wrong with the mercenary's face, finishing with mockery and provoking him even more by questioning if he was wrong in his statements. Faced with that accusation, the hero thought that this was indeed the first image that comes to mind when one hears the word mercenary. However, this is just a silly prejudice. If mercenaries cannot fight properly from the start, they cannot build trust, and without trust, the system cannot be sustained. Thus, the protagonist said he thought the knight trusted them in the war by recognizing their skills, and that throwing away respect with the end of the war was not honorable. This left Robern completely indignant, so Roman explained that the young man alone killed 100 of the soldiers. In this case, he questioned if they had done nothing. However, petulantly, the knight laughed at the protagonist's feat. He then began to laugh and mock the archer along with his soldiers, believing it to be a lie. This enraged everyone in the chat, not just them, but also the hero himself. In this case, Roman, already disappointed, tried to argue once more. However, suddenly a person appeared, interrupting their dialogue. She was saying to let her go as she claimed she could walk on her own. This person was the Golden Knight from before, presenting himself before every one of the few soldiers. In respect for his opponent, he admitted that Robern came out victorious in this battle. He vented about his castle being taken without shame and justification, and all of his soldiers being killed. Finally, questioning if this is what the Generics call honor, leaving the knight speechless. The protagonist, in turn, seeing how the knight reacted, indicated that the person with the golden helmet must have a higher status. Seeing this, the warrior stammered while trying to say that his actions were for the good of Talorn's people, but he was cut off by the knight, who asked to speak with Generit. However, Robert explained that this could not be done, and at the moment when the Golden Knight was about to question, he realized something even more important. Before his eyes was the archer who had massacred a large part of his troops with extreme ease. Seeing this, he began walking toward the protagonist, who thought it was intimidating. Unexpectedly, the Golden Knight addressed the mercenary, which shocked him completely. Then he asked if he was a knight of Generit, and he promptly replied that he was not. In this case, he was asked what the hero's position was, with Roman explaining that he was a mercenary just like him. This information definitely sparked a hidden interest in the knight's mind. Then he asked if the one who completed 100 kills alone was really this mercenary. With this information coming out of the enemy's mouth, the situation completely changed for the Knights of Jin. Alman in turn wondered how the Golden Knight had this information, and the stream chat believed it was an honor to receive recognition from the opposing commander. It was clear that this was far from a joke, but the warriors still didn't understand how an archer who attacks from hiding could kill 100 soldiers alone. At this moment, the knight commented that there wasn't even a trace of trust in the hero's companions, calling them fools. In this case, putting his hands on his helmet, the commander asked if the protagonist still wanted to continue working with them. He began to remove his helmet and added that these people couldn't recognize the warrior's value. Being the first to notice due to the person's voice, the chat understood it to be a feminine tone. And when the helmet was completely removed, the theory proved real, with the knight's secret identity revealed as a girl with long purple hair. After that, with a friendly expression, the girl asked if the hero would like to work with her, and a choice window appeared in the system, giving the protagonist two options: one to accept for having his value recognized, and another to refuse for already having sworn loyalty to another. Unexpectedly, it became clear to you that the Golden Knight was actually Rosanita, the second heroine. Despite the defeat, she presented a relaxed and confident attitude and an unsettling yet fascinating air different from what is normally felt with Emilia. Even as a novice in the game, it was clear to the hero the effort the developers invested in this character. Additionally, it was obvious that the Degenerate Knights were also captivated by the girl's charm. At this moment, the stream chat began to pressure the protagonist to choose Rosanita's route instead of Emilia's. Then he remembered that he had to choose one option between the two. Initially, he believed it was not the time to change heroines considering his progress with Emilia. He thought that even though it was a story within a game, he still hadn't experienced everything, having seen her from the beginning and grown attached to her. Due to the delay in his response, Rosanita asked if the archer would leave her waiting like a fool and reiterated to get his answer. Then the pressure began to overwhelm you, who didn't know the best option to choose at that moment. In this case, he decided to make that decision later and wisely ended the broadcast at the peak of the audience, leaving all his subscribers extremely furious. Their last comments didn't spare any effort to insult him. Monitoring the hero's performance in his room, Kim noticed that the group of people who insulted him at the end of the broadcast was the same that always appeared in the initial minutes, understanding them to be fanatic fans who weren't truly offending him, as they were the ones who spread the flow events in various communities. However, Kim was still surprised by the large number of them. The general fan base consisted of men in their 20s and 30s, but the sexes of hardcore fans were evenly distributed. While male viewers donated more frequently, female viewers surpassed in total revenue by a small margin. However, thinking of Seo, the protagonist's friend understood it was too early to judge the statistics with the data he had at the moment. In the end, there was a love that surpassed the total donations received, and with these indicators, it would be better to play the game distributed by the Funk next. Suddenly, someone appeared at Kim's house, loudly calling his name. It was the boy's parents appearing at his door, with his father responsible for the fury and shouts. The boy's mother tried to restrain him, but the father was extremely angry, asking what the boy had done. He questioned if Kim was really leaving the company, and at that moment, he withdrew in submission. Shouting even louder, the boy's father questioned if he was out of his mind. He asked if his son had ever thought about his father's image, explaining that the resignation announcement came through the director. In this case, an imposing order is given for Kim to come to work at the company the next morning. The boy tries to question it, but his father stands firm with his words and with a serious look, asks if he has anything to say. Faced with this, acknowledging his insignificance, Kim says no and reverently states that he will do as his father wishes. After the family conflict, the boy's mother comes to calm things down, asking if he would like to eat some fruit. However, the boy looks at his computer and says he can do it himself. It has been a week since he started his new job, and the boy has managed to earn about 271, which is not a fortune. For now, Kim has not yet achieved any of his goals, but he is definitely enjoying what he is doing and beginning to see hope. A tear fell on the boy's desk, and he wondered if everything until now had been a simple dream. However, as quickly as the tear fell, he wiped it away, thinking it was too long to be a dream. Shortly after, at his house, the protagonist is sleeping dead tired. But he ends up waking up because someone is ringing his doorbell in the middle of the night. He goes to his door and opens it, asking why someone would come there at such a time. Unexpectedly, the person outside his house was someone the hero knew, who introduced himself, commenting that he almost died waiting. It was Kim, who, despite having had a hard time, was quite excited, informing him that he had left his parents' house. In his new home, Kim cheerfully eats a piece of chicken while drinking a beer. He asks if his friend isn't drinking since he ordered 2 cans, and you informs him that he doesn't drink before streaming. In this case, the protagonist's friend sarcastically comments that it can't be helped and starts drinking both cans of beer. Changing the subject, you ask his friend why he left home so suddenly, even though it's not strange after becoming an adult. A bit embarrassed, Kim says it's complicated and asks to explain later, which the hero accepts, saying he can wait until a more comfortable time. In this case, the boy asks if it's okay for him to stay there for a while, and the protagonist says it's fine since there's space for both of them. After eating and drinking a lot, it's time to talk about work, so Kim asks what Yu intends to do in Kingdom Age. He comments that the hero seems to be at a love crossroads between Amelia and Rosanita. When questioned, the protagonist thought it was something more important, so he just asked his friend if who he chooses really matters. Faced with this, his friend shouts, asking if the hero hadn't looked at the forums after the stream, and he replies that he hadn't. It's said that there's a discussion about Amelia and Rosanita, so it's wise for the protagonist to be careful with his choice to avoid hurting business. In this case, Yu just comments that his viewers' reactions are quite wild, which leaves his friend completely beside himself. In his mind, Kim was impressed that his friend was doing well even after seeing these threats, thinking that if it were him, he would have at least lost sleep. Seeing those messages, he remembers that he has something to tell his friend. He comments that given how things are going, it's noticeable that the game's end is approaching and they still haven't discovered the next game to play. It's a fact that it has to be a game that satisfies their existing viewers while generating more traffic, and in this case, Kim places his belongings on the table, having come prepared. With a confident look, he comments that there's no problem because he has done preliminary research. Thus, he asks his friend to get excited because what he will show now is something revolutionary. It's a game called Battle Rage set in a modern warfare scenario. Seeing this, Kim asks if his friend has ever played it, and Yu comments that he has only heard the name. Battle Rage is an online PvP survival game with the ultimate goal of being the last man standing among 100 players while using various weapons. Good aim and good decision-making are key to growing in the game. Taking all this into consideration, it's a game that fits well, considering the general trends and the protagonist's skills. As expected from an elite secretary, his friend did a great job, and in this case, Yu asks if the game is also good, because it seems fun. Unfortunately, the hero comments that he is not used to PvP games, thus questioning if he should practice a bit before the stream. Faced with this, Kim shouts, slamming his hand against the table, telling him never to do that. Somewhat disappointed, the boy understands that apparently the hero knows nothing about what his audience wants. To explain, he asks Yu to reflect on what the viewers most want to see in his stream. The protagonist responds that it is his gameplay, but it's far from that because anyone can stream good gameplay if they are skilled enough. In this case, he asks what it is, and at that moment, Kim points his index finger at our hero. He is informed that what the audience most wants is an incomparable genius. The boy asks the protagonist to remember his first stream in the game. For a moment on that day, the hero displayed overwhelming performances despite not having practiced. It is said that viewers go crazy when they see a true genius, so Kim believes that the best thing to do is to repeat the process, showing only perfect plays without practice. However, the protagonist recalls that Battle Rage is a game focused on guns, explaining that he knows nothing beyond archery. But the boy turns on a screen and asks for Yu's attention for a moment. The screen shows the hero shooting an enemy in the head while riding a horse, questioning if anyone can do it that way. The hero, in turn, believes it to be something normal, and Kim debunks this mistaken belief, explaining that the protagonist is incomparable to others in these game styles. In this case, Yu thinks that this result might have been caused due to his secret scheme. He informs that he programs a ranking system before starting his stream with direction sense and agility training. The hero explains that although it is something that came with the capsule, it is well optimized, so he clears it daily with the most difficult setting. In this case, Kim asked the hero's highest score, to which he replied it was about 12,000 points. After the explanation, the boy begins to feel agitated while looking at his phone screen, and he informs that according to his research, his colleague is apparently in the #1 position. So he shows the ranking system for the hero to look at for himself. And seeing this, he realizes it is true, making his friend's expectations of him increase even more. Now the theory that the protagonist is a genius in his field is confirmed, but it still takes a bit for the realization to fully sink in for our hero, as with all abrupt events. Kim, in turn, is extremely excited about the legacy they will leave when they start streaming Battle Rage. Later, even though it was still daylight outside, our hero was already starting to get back to work. When asked about this, he explained that he was testing the time that attracts the most viewers, which is definitely a good idea. Anyway, Kim wishes the protagonist good luck on his journey. However, he finds his friend's level of affection strange, making Kim nervous about the lack of gratitude. The boy still tries to interact somehow, but the hero only asks him to take his hand off, informing him that he is closing the capsule. Logging back into the game, things return to the exact moment they were paused, with the girl indignant at being ignored. Again, Rosanita asks to be answered, and the choice window appears along with the desperate cheers of his viewers. At this moment, you already understand that the choice he makes completely changes the game's direction. Thus, he tells the girl that he's flattered by the offer, but, as a mercenary, has already sworn loyalty to another person. Faced with this response, Rosanita understands but states that it is a shame. Finally, she leaves, saying that the archer is better than most knights she has met. The commander gives the order to stop their enemies, but at this moment, no one else wants to fight. Despite everything, that choice was quite rational because the protagonist knew that choosing Rosanita would prolong the story much more. Combining the useful with the pleasant, maintaining his loyalty to Emilia was the best decision to make. Suddenly, Emilia herself appears on the battlefield, surprising one of the soldiers at the rear. And obviously, our hero too, who among all is the most shocked. Emilia, in turn, is extremely happy to see Almond in front of her after the decision he made. In this case, she begins to walk toward her companion, passing by numerous soldiers who are ignored even after trying to call for her attention. With the girl close to him, he tries to ask how she is, but she doesn't waste time, and does what she has wanted to do for a long time, ending all that confusion with a strong hug between the two. After the hug, the stream chat goes wild, and then the hero places his hands on the girl's shoulders, suggesting they return as they had emerged victorious. In this case, the girl shows a shy face and genuinely praises the boy for his deeds in the battle. And so, in a romantic scene, the two finally kiss. However, this was not shown to the viewers, who were extremely disappointed that the hero skipped the scene. After that, everyone heads back to the kingdom's territory on their horses and carriages. Unexpectedly, one of the knights approaches the hero, commenting on him being the archer who killed 100 targets and praising his incredible feats. Faced with this, the protagonist is not sure how to react, and Roman admires the soldiers' hypocrisy, as they refuse to believe it just moments ago. However, at least the enemy recognized their achievement, or rather the hero's achievement. But you knows it wasn't all just because of him, and that it only happened because the captain and the others were fighting at the forefront. Seeing this, the mercenary thanks the hero's words, saying that it will comfort his group, but Yu is confused because he considers himself one of them too. In this case, Roman comments that the protagonist is no longer a mercenary because now he has the freedom to do whatever he wants. Regardless of everything, the mercenary thanks him because, due to what the boy did, each of them earned enough to relax for 4 months. And at that moment, the chat admires the man for being a true friend to Almond. As the journey comes to an end, the group arrives at Jinrit's castle, with Yu being the first to cross the gates. Seeing this, the boy is impressed by the interior of a great noble's castle. With Jing taking the lead, she orders the guard soldiers to open the door because her guest is a precious person who will dine with her. Promptly, the soldier allows the two to enter, and the hero ends up meeting a certain person who admires his presence. Extending his hands, Lord Jinrit asks the protagonist to sit, saying he has heard a lot about him. Being Emilia's father, he cheerfully comments that the boy did a splendid job, and that he must simply give him the proper thanks. Thus, the noble asks one of his maids to hurry and bring the food, and Yu is happy that the Lord does not judge others based on their status. After that, the system informs that the hero has successfully joined Emilia's family for a meal. When his plate is delivered by the maid, Yu notices that there is only water in his bowl. Faced with this, some buttons appear in front of the plate, so the hero clicks on a few of them to try to figure out what it is. However, he realizes he has pressed the same button several times without thinking. So Yu panics, not knowing how this rhythm game starts. The stream chat, in turn, understands that the developers configured it so that mercenaries would know table manners. Then they say that daily life can also be a battlefield in Kingdom Age. However, the difficulty of accessing a simple meal was beyond what everyone thought was right. Another quest appears after several have already been completed, leaving our hero increasingly agonized. Inside the capsule, Yu understands that this is the real feeling of meeting his father-in-law for the first time. Then all the viewers make similar comments, like one saying that the game is now a marriage simulator. Back in the game, Emilia's father, holding a wine glass, asks the hero a decisive question. He asks if he would like to become one of his knights, and consequently, the system opens an option window. The stream chat once again starts to engage because it was unknown that a knight's route existed and such rapid progress could be made. While the chat comments, the protagonist thinks that in a game where the main content consists of wandering as a mercenary, changing the route will transform the game. In this case, it is likely that this is the end of the game, different from what you thought when you chose Emilia instead of Rosanita. Among many comments, the hero's mind is filled with thoughts, but to organize things, he focuses on choosing one of the two options. With his decision made, the protagonist decides to end the live stream, leaving all the subscribers furious again with the sudden end. Back at his house, the capsule opens, and the hero realizes he doesn't sweat as much even when he fights, and that although shorter, the broadcast ended well. Kim, in turn, approaches happily, praising his friend for the great broadcast, which leaves you confused because there were no action scenes today. In this case, the boy states that Almond will know just by looking at the feed, indicating that the day's flow events are at the top of the forums. Proudly, Kim claims to be someone who always lets the data speak, and Yu receives this with boredom. Anyway, the boy informs him that he received a call from the representative of Punk, giving the green light for the editor's salary, which brings great relief to Yu. In the end, Kim says it's natural for them to consider offering this first, but still, the protagonist explains that it's different when you get an official offer. In that case, the boy informs him that they will have the meeting, and then the hero understands that it's best to sleep early to wake up well the next day. The next day on the city streets, people walk calmly towards their respective jobs and tasks. On the hero's smartphone, some news about games and jobs starts to appear. Among them, one states that the novice streamer Almond now has a partnership with the representatives of the multinational game company Punk. Even in the middle of the city streets, people are engaged, commenting among themselves about the unexpected contract with Punk despite the streamer playing Kingdom Age. It is a fact that Punk is now the largest game distributor, dominating the market without any specific strategy. They always maintain a strong position. However, lately, Higame's performances have grown exponentially in the market. In response, Punk is now focused on promotions, exclusive titles, programs, and strategies, one of these programs being the so-called partner streamer. Through this program, they push the most popular streamers to play games promoted by Punk, giving them the due support in return. However, for most of the popular streamers, it was still strange to have a partnership with a streamer who could only gather 1,000 people live. Despite many praising, others believe it to be a bad decision as the boy is at the same level as minor influencers like Bubblegum. However, some comments defended the hero, saying that those 1,000 views were in a small game and could turn into something much bigger in a high-end game. Currently, a widely shared advice was for Almond to stop playing Kingdom Age and start playing bigger games. However, there was still a fan base for the game. Even without any stream at the moment, his subscribers gathered in the hero's chat to talk among themselves and wait for the next live. In another space, he was introduced to the executives of his now partner company. Quickly, he goes to a room where the contract is presented, ready to be signed. Back in the community chat, the boy's subscribers comment that it would be good if he started his stream soon as they are already ready. At this moment, Almond really starts his stream just as his viewers wished. For a few moments, the hero does not appear on the live, leaving his subscribers confused. But this is quickly resolved with you welcoming everyone. With his live open, the protagonist informs that he would like to announce that he has finally created his account on AllTube, now having the company Punk as a partner. Moreover, he thanks everyone for the love and support given until now. And he says that from today, his gameplay clips will be posted on this channel. The previous montages will also be remastered and uploaded. In this case, he asks his subscribers to go there and check whenever they can. Finally, he explains that he will continue to work hard to bring more and more exciting content. Quickly, the news spreads across all media, leaving the popular ones in ecstasy and the haters irritated. After the announcement, a toast takes place in a restaurant near the company. The employee there explains that the hero did very well, but he himself doesn't understand what he did to deserve such praise. Changing the subject, the man comments that it would have been good if Jaya had come with them to the company dinner, but Yu still doesn't understand, saying he is having a casual meal. In the man's view, this conception was wrong, but he goes back to talking about the girl, questioning how she managed to edit 3 entire videos in just 2 days. Seeing this while drinking his beer, the hero explains that the girl already did this as a hobby even before becoming the official editor. In that case, Kim asks why she wasn't excited when they offered her the editor position, and it is explained that the change would mean less contact with the hero. After that, Yu begins to address another subject, something the employee should tell him. He doesn't quite understand, but as he starts his explanation, Yu's head is abruptly lowered by the man in the suit. In this situation, the two stay low and the protagonist unexpectedly remains calm. Disappointed, he states that the man could just say he didn't feel like talking. However, the man only asks Almond to be quiet. It is then informed that the ex-team of the company has just arrived at the restaurant, looking for a place to sit. In this case, our hero understands that this restaurant is very close to the competitor Asung's company. Then the man in the suit whispers that they should leave quietly while everything remains calm, which Yu agrees to. However, one of the employees from the other company notices their presence, already drawing their attention. A strong memory of this man appears in Kim's mind, recalling a day when he belittled him for being at the company due to his connections. With all this context, that man proudly approaches the protagonist's table. Upon closer inspection, he is impressed that Yu Sanghyun is also there. At this moment, with an eager smile, Kim asks if the man has been well. And the man just asks his acquaintance where he has been. Laughing mockingly, the man asks if the boy has a new job in the area. Finally, it was obvious what he was doing because knowing the manager Park's personality, he was focused on the two of them. His real goal was to hear from the boys' mouths that they were unable to find work, so Kim already knows what he will think when he says he is Yu's manager. Moreover, the manager also decides to speak with the protagonist, stating that if he sees his boss, he should greet him. However, the hero brusquely responds that he doesn't want to greet anyone, leaving the two completely unsettled. Seeing this, the man questions what was just said, and Yu stands firm in his words. In this case, that manager complains that the boy has good hands but uses his head wrong. Thus, Yu states that they are not on greeting terms, making the manager uncomfortable with the boy's harsh behavior. Faced with this, he claims that the reason the hero is still out of the mainstream media is due to actions like this that don't relate to societal functioning. Thus, he says that current terms don't matter and that the boy should be taught to greet his elders regardless. After this moral lesson, silence takes over the place for a few moments, with the manager not receiving a response from the boy. And very different from a positive response, the protagonist starts to laugh while recalling the moral lesson given. Fearlessly, he rebuts, exposing the hypocrisy of someone who approaches other people's tables to bother them with personal questions and still demands politeness. In this case, the boy explains that it's not very polite to say one thing and do another, and so he asks Manager Park for his opinion on what he just said. Without more arguments, the man considers resorting to violence to defend his honor. However, our hero still remains confident and firm, exuding an aura much greater than any intimidation posed by the man. Again, the protagonist asks if the manager will respond to his question, which initially makes him back off. But in the manager's mind, causing a commotion was the only way to come out on top, and at this moment, Kim entered complete despair, not knowing how to proceed. Unfortunately, an important personality arrives at the restaurant just before the conflict unfolds. In a friendly manner, he greets our hero, happy to see him once again. The presence of Director O the place brought a moment of relief to Kim's troubled mind. Moreover, as a consequence, the fight stops to give attention to the new guest. Director O in turn walks towards you, excitedly saying that the video sent already has an incredible view count. He explains that Punk's directors were very excited to see it, and in this case, he boasts about his good eye for details. In the background of that conversation, the manager is in disbelief, and the director continues to inform that one of them requested a meeting to have dinner with you. In this case, the man who had previously tried to create a commotion is now impressed by the importance that little boy had. At this moment, some people approached, happy to see Almond and beginning to praise him. Among these people, a girl asks for an autograph, and the director in turn asks the hero to do it to have a keepsake, so he agrees. However, for the director, an autograph wouldn't be something so exclusive, since he loudly says that the protagonist signed a partnership contract with them. Contrary to all his instincts and preconceptions, it is now clear to the man that you has a partnership contract with Punk. Thus, the feeling of envy takes over the manager's heart, who gets furious and promptly announces his departure. One of the employees, in turn, comments that he had already ordered his food, but that man is in such a state of fury that no one else dares to question him. Finally, all the former members leave, revitalizing the atmosphere. After the resolution of the conflict, Kim thanks Director O, but he says there's no need to thank him because people like that will always exist. Even so, he still states that O lied for their benefit, which initially leaves him confused. Then the hero explains the part about the directors getting excited and the view count, not to mention the private dinner. Laughing, O understands he exaggerated but explains that those people are the type that bark but don't bite and get nervous when they hear important names. Again, the protagonist thanks him from the bottom of his heart, and director asks him not to worry about it, ensuring he enjoys the meal. However, before leaving, O calls you to talk about one more pending matter. He asks to be notified as soon as the boy is available to have the dinner with the aforementioned director. Faced with this, a feeling of anxiety and happiness begins to appear on Yu's face. But to be sure, he still asks if this is also a lie. But with a good laugh, O denies it, stating that he meant exactly what he said. In conclusion, O explains that he only lied about the office directors, with everything else being true. Until that moment, you hadn't seen the view count on his videos, but his success was already a fact. Later, in a meeting, an executive informed the hero that content that performs well on a streaming platform doesn't necessarily succeed on a recorded platform. It is likely that the hero will need to upload at least 20 videos to get some trend of profit. Indeed, he knew this was true because all planning is done to invest in the future. However, initially, you didn't expect much success. Nonetheless, during these few days, the view count on his videos reached an incredible peak, with one of them hitting 100,000 views. Something very difficult to happen because you remembers that even Bubblegum failed on Altu despite being the #1 streamer on the Treeview platform. Faced with this, a memory of a given advice comes to his mind, saying that success on the platform is largely influenced by the editors. Thus, it becomes evident that Jaya had an immense contribution to the level of viewer reception. The impact of the girl's monages influenced the success of the hero's professional channel, making him understand that he is a very lucky man. Sitting on the living room couch, Kim announces that he read a message from assistant Lee saying that apparently Manager Park's mood is worse than ever. He explains that the manager believes the hero is supported by some kind of mega corporation. After that, the hero doesn't understand how the man came to that conclusion, so Kim laughs and explains that it's probably due to the director's support. Changing the subject, Kim asks if the cleaning is done because he wants to go to the bathroom, and Yu is impressed by his nerve. Later, the protagonist went out to do his routine training, and in his mind, he thought that it was doing him good. The previous day, he ate fried chicken and drank a beer, so even though he's retired from sports, Yu still believes there is no excuse to relax. During his run, the hero's earphones suddenly have their music cut off, being replaced by a call sound. In this case, Yu stops for a moment to pay attention to the call, as it might be something important. The person responsible for the call is Kim, who, already very stressed upon receiving a return call, after listening to a long and uninterrupted complaint, you remark that Kim was indeed behaving like a manager. Getting straight to the point, he mentioned that they were getting a lot of views and that the director wanted to talk to him, but he couldn't accompany him for that. Once the message was delivered, he asked if all this drama was just to convey that message to him. However, there was still more to be clarified and communicated. Part of their success was due to Jaya, so they should do something to properly thank her. On that note, they fully agreed and suggested giving her a thank you gift for all she's done. However, you asked them to forget about that suggestion, much to the surprise of Kim, who was still talking to him. Since he was walking in the park, he had just seen her with his own eyes. Jaya was running. There were many people on the street at that time, most of them busy since it was business hours. The young man was in a restaurant that had recently opened and was happy he arrived early because it was starting to get crowded. He took the tray of food over to where Jaya was. She was sitting, seemingly deep in thought. As he sat down, he mentioned that he had finally gotten both of their orders, to which she thanked him. He wanted to reward her with something more expensive, but the girl suggested food as it was perfectly fine for her. If there were any updates, he wanted her to tell him, but he was a little worried about having been inconvenient. The truth is, the girl was quite content with that unexpected snack. While she tried to eat, the young man couldn't stop watching her, intrigued by her simple contentment. She mentioned it would be hard to eat with him staring. They were still in the restaurant enjoying their meal. The fries were delicious, he thought, but he knew he wasn't the type to start conversations easily. But Jaya, in this regard, was exceptional. She was simply too quiet. Try and talk to her, all he got were simple responses that shut down any attempt at dialogue. She merely agreed with whatever he said. As a result, the conversation went nowhere. However, while engaging dialogue is interesting, they did need to continue with idle chatter. To him, Jaya must have had a tough time while working, which would explain her lack of interest in conversing. Yet to his surprise, she admitted that she wasn't very good at maintaining conversations. Maybe you could know this since she talks a lot when she's drunk, but he said that when they talked about videos, she was much more talkative than that. But that was work, and she could talk about that quite well. Outside of that, she had no idea what to talk about with someone she was with. It seemed like after saying this, she swallowed her embarrassment because she appeared to want to know how to keep a conversation going. With that, she asked the young man if he thought she was a strange person because of this. Things had progressed too quickly now, and he remained silent for a brief moment in response to her reaction. Jaya began to open up about this difficulty, saying she had heard all her life from people that she was a strange girl. But before she could continue, you said that it's really hard to deal with some things at work. He mentioned that there are positive aspects of being in a company, but there are also difficult moments while working, and that holding back some feelings makes people overflow with stress. He asked a rhetorical question about overflowing with those feelings. Since he and his friend left their jobs, he knew very well what it felt like to feel this way, but he wanted to know from her what was going on that made her feel like that. Jaya, hearing this, was surprised by her colleague's understanding. After all, he expects her to talk about it when she feels comfortable doing so. Jaya has some memories of who is in front of her and the image she had of him. In fact, he is an adult and carries himself with the maturity of one. He was all online and in front of his camera. The netizens are talking to him. He told them that if they didn't know, he is now a streamer and works with Punk. That statement triggered a variety of comments from everyone. He seemed quite pleased with all the commotion over a simple announcement. In that particular session, he would play Kingdom Age, which slightly surprised the netizens. Those watching him had the impression that in that session, he might finish the game. Moreover, there was already a new game lined up to be played by him. There is now a large palace covered with snow everywhere. A very well-dressed woman is waiting to welcome someone who had just arrived. The player stands before her, bowing and extending the sword he carried with him. With one of her hands, she grasps the hilt of the sword, and with it, she knights Almond as her knight, a result that seemed to be desired by him as he looked to her with joy. She did the same as she looked at him with great happiness after completing the ceremony. During the scene, netizens asked if that was really the end of everything. Almond is inside the palace, protected from the cold and without his coat. Outside, the flowers had bloomed, which was truly impressive as a time skip had occurred. Looking at his hands, he realizes that his clothes have changed, and they are much finer now. There is only one conclusion to this. He is truly a full knight now. But there was still another thing that left him astonished. A radiant golden light appears. It is as if a scroll were catching fire. The glow of that object illuminated Almond's face. In front of him appeared one last challenge for him to finally become a true knight. That could only mean one thing, which was obvious from the scroll. He had not yet become a knight. A young boy suddenly opens the door to the room, calling for Almond, which startles him. He was anxious because he wasn't even dressed yet, and he would be late for the competition this way. Another unexpected piece of news. Almond didn't know about any competition and wanted to learn more about it. The boy asked if he was crazy on fentanyl, but Almond said no, not that day. That is the day when the legitimacy of his knightly title will be determined, and the boy rushes to dress him in the armor. The young boy says if Lady Amelia knew about this, but before he could finish, someone had arrived. It was her, who heard part of the conversation and now wanted to know what she should know. It doesn't take long for her to stand on the tip of one foot. She approached Almond and gave him a kiss, a big one. It was so sudden and unexpected that Almond was a bit startled, and the netizens say he has already received his reward. She says that if he doesn't win, his future will be in trouble, but Almond says he is well aware of that. Amelia says she has full faith in Almond's success, to which he thanks her for her kind words. Hand in hand they go. Almond is ready to show everyone that he is fit to be a knight. The couple passes together through the bedroom doors, heading to the trial site. In what appears to be a large stadium, there are many people present waiting to see Almond's ordeal. He didn't expect a reindeer like that to be so close to the castle. He's curious to know if it's a gladiator fight. Alberto greets him and says he decided to show up after all, and apparently he's a figure despised by the viewers. Almond was belittled by him, which he immediately noticed. He said the Jeanneret family must be in trouble, and the title of knight is losing its importance with this. And since Almond does not have noble origins, he must prove himself in front of all of them. But Amelia promptly comes to his defense, saying that Almond has already proven himself countless times and has even killed monsters. The foolish one says those rumors are absurd and cannot be proven. And Amelia says the Count speaks as if he were a person with vast combat experience. Those words hurt the little man's ego, who was annoyed for being insulted in front of Almond, and the couple was already completely ignoring him. Almond calls to her and says not to worry about anything, because he was the one who suggested that competition. For a brief moment, she was silent after hearing that. Approaching him, she touched him and said she wasn't worried. What she really didn't like was seeing him being belittled by people, whoever they might be. Despite this, Almond says that from now on, he will not be belittled by anyone. The people in the arena, which is packed, do not stop shouting Almond's name. The support for him was immense. It was as if everyone in the stands wanted only one result: Almond's victory. Already in the arena, he wants to know what the challenges are, and the Count orders him to stop complaining. As the gates open, he said there is a saying that speaks volumes about knights. As soon as the gate is opened, a large wooden stake pierces the ground. A true knight can handle a troll on his own, concluded the Count as soon as the beast was released into the arena. That was a bit too much, to the surprise of Almond and those watching him on the streaming. In the stands, people were apprehensive because a troll was really dangerous. They were face to face now, and someone commented that Almond only uses a bow and arrow to fight. Taking down a troll with just that would be very difficult. Trolls have the ability to regenerate, and the netizens say he should be using a weapon with cutting strikes. The only one happy about it was the Count, who ironically wished him to do his best. That is if he was truly a knight, and the Count and his entourage were so scared they watched the fight from a distance. It didn't take long for the troll to start approaching Almond. The beast did an attack immediately, which made Almond think of a strategy. Then he executed the first attack, shooting an arrow into the troll's neck. As soon as the arrow hit its target, he raised both hands as if he were surrendering. He turned his back on the monster, which was now lying on the ground. The arrow he had shot glowed a scarlet color, as if preventing the troll from regenerating. From a great distance, the Count and his lackeys watched that with all the surprise they could feel at the unexpected turn of events. Almond is still turned away from the monster, which hasn't tried to get up. The netizens celebrate because that had been a perfectly executed shot. They completely forgot trolls are no exception to Almond's unique skill. The crowd cheers, impressed by the result. Almond made it look easy, as if anyone could do that. The people started chanting hooray for Amelia, and 3 cheers for Almond. The Count, who was watching everything, was almost having a stroke from all the anger. He ordered knights to examine the troll's body because he suspected someone might have poisoned it. He was so outraged that he thought about doing it himself, but Amelia interrupted the little man's scene as the competition was already over. If he continued, he would only ruin himself and his reputation. Even though he was completely dissatisfied and angry, the Count had no choice but to agree with the result. Considering the recent events, Almond says that from now on, his title as a knight is completely valid. A cheerful song fills the air of the castle now. A netizen says it resembles an ending theme. Almond and Amelia are in different attire because now they are going to get married. The young woman's face could not hide the great happiness she felt at that moment. The two walk towards the altar, and the netizens say it was a beautiful ending to see. On the other side, Almond wondered if that was really the end of that story. That was his farewell to the first virtual reality game he had played, and that narrative lasted no more than a week. Despite this, the game had completely changed his life. He says goodbye to the game and thanks it for everything. The credits were finally ending and Almond sat in his chair. The game Kingdom Age was over. There was nothing more to be done in the story. Now what he wants is to go to the next game, to the delight of those who follow him. Reading the comments, he notices they talk a lot about the game Electron and others with PvP dynamics. All that information makes him feel a bit pressured about his next choice. Online games are different because he would be dealing with real people and not artificial intelligence, games that already have good players. They won't go easy on newcomers, and his image as a genius could fall apart because of this. But fear cannot stop him, and he announces what the next game will be. The one he decided to play is called Battle Large. Looking at the screen in front of him, he regrets this a little, because he imagines that as soon as he changes the game, those who followed him for Kingdom Age might leave. But that is a common problem for everyone who works with streaming. People don't get attached so easily. It's normal. Depending on the game change, some even lose half of their audience. It's a risk they have to take because, in the long run, it usually ends up paying off. Which is obvious if you think about it. The audience ends up being attracted to those who manage to grow. Even so, losing audience is something painful, no matter how it happens. And this is really happening. He ended up losing some subscribers due to the conclusion of the game. Now he just needs to wait for the download of the new game to start playing. The audience comments on the matter. The change has made those who remain curious about what is to come. This new game is much more realistic than its predecessor, and a motivated viewer made a generous donation to him. If it's as he imagines, the physics of that game should be quite interesting. Either way, one thing is certain. It will be an interesting and fun experience. A helicopter is flying through the skies. A uniformed man inside it says they finally reached their destination. They should prepare to descend immediately, and Almond was a bit hesitant about it. The game felt too real. The height is frightening, and the audience notices that he is scared to jump out of the helicopter. The soldier is now yelling at him, "This isn't the time to be afraid." He needs to jump right away. However, Almond is really reluctant to make that jump. Watching the tutorial, he didn't expect things to be like this, and the guy next to him jumped in front of him. He watches as the parachute opens below them, incredulous. While he is stalling with his fears, another one jumps from the helicopter. Now there are several people descending with parachutes toward the ground, and he is still up there in the safety of a helicopter. Gathering his courage, he realizes he can't lose to the others. The first of his feet is finally out of the aircraft. The leap of faith is made, and Almond is now diving towards the ground. The sensation was really intense and real. It didn't even feel like it was just a virtual reality game. During his free fall, he screams non-stop. Nothing else is happening now but the adrenaline rush of the situation. The parachute opened automatically, to his surprise, and now descending more gently. He is relieved that the scare has passed. Even though the descent is gentle, he feels he is going too fast towards the ground. The ground is approaching at a pace that does not please him. Almond hits the ground clumsily, and some say he is really a newbie, completely unaccustomed. He pulls himself together from the fall, still attached to his parachute. Now safe, he wonders why this game has to be like this right from the start. It's way too intense. Around him, the other players are already brawling like debt collectors chasing payments. Everything was very chaotic, and it didn't take long for him to be spotted by other players on the map. They approach saying they were lucky because he is just a beginner, and they would take care of him quickly. Almond thinks about running away because they go, "No, he's a beginner." He even thinks the game shows his level to the other players, but that's due to his awkward landing. He spotted an abandoned building in front of him and is heading towards it to find shelter. A closed door is in front of him. Once inside the building, he wonders if there is anything there he can use as a weapon, as he hadn't thought much about what he might find there. It doesn't take long for his eyes to spot something. On top of a table, there's a weapon ready to be used. It's a refined bow and arrow, a weapon he has a lot of experience with. He approached the weapon to see it a little better. He used something similar when he was an athlete, and he didn't expect to see a weapon like that so quickly in this game. He thought about picking it up to defend himself. During this, he heard a suspicious noise inside the building. There were players entering there through the access from the external stairs. Grabbing the bow, he now knows that players are accessing the building from the second floor. The players open a door that gives access to the inside of the building. To them, Almond must still be on the first floor, not knowing what to do. They imagine he must be hiding instead of collecting items. One of them is sure that from the way he landed, he is definitely a beginner, but one of his buddies has already received an arrow to the head, just to be careful. That was the first kill on the map, to the surprise of those who thought they were hunting a newbie. They are now whispering not to give away any more information. They don't know how that happened, and they quickly tried to identify the direction the arrow came from. One of them points his weapon, thinking he will be able to take down the protagonist. Before he could do anything, an arrow was planted in his bald head. Almond was already holding the bow, ready to take down the last fool. But he was surprised by what he saw. The last hostile player had fled the building because he was at a disadvantage. Almond doesn't know if he should follow him. His audience says he should go after him, while others say that this is a survival game, and what's really good is to stay alive. He thinks about going after the last one, who must be nearby, and a player appears behind him. The fool also has a bow and is ready to shoot, but he didn't have time to do anything because Almond was much faster than him. His little body falls to the ground, lifeless. Almond got a triple kill with that. He even thinks the player imitated him, thinking he would have some kind of advantage with that strategy, and the audience goes wild. He wonders if it's always this easy to deal with players in games of that genre. His audience says he was matched with inexperienced players since he is a beginner. If that's true, he can play with a little more confidence then. A very loud noise suddenly fills the area. Almond was caught by surprise as he didn't expect that. He wants to know what it was since it happened so suddenly. A warning appears in front of him saying the blue zone will shrink in the next 30 seconds. The warning flashes before his eyes. The shrinking of the blue zone is meant to prevent players from hiding indefinitely. Anyone outside of it loses health continuously, and Almond's position is not ideal. Looking out the window, he notices everyone is moving. It's best for him to do the same. Outside, there isn't much to hide behind. He should be careful. Hidden behind a wall, he hears a vehicle approaching, possibly a car. He doesn't know where it's coming from but hopes it passes by his location. But he is soon surprised by a shot that barely misses his ear. From the same direction, more shots come, forcing him to take cover. The audience enjoyed that, saying he's really a newbie because he got scared. He defends himself, saying he reacted that way because it's his first experience in that particular game. Behind him, the car he had heard is getting closer, and since the car can't get too close given the obstacles, he thinks about hiding quickly. Meanwhile, the wall is shattered by the impact of the bullets coming his way. Almond runs, realizing that his attackers are destroying places where he could take shelter. If he stays exposed, he will get hit sooner or later, so he finds an intact wall. He prepared to climb it while those shooting at him reload their weapons. Almond is now on the other side, a bit more protected. Shots are fired, but this wall seems more resilient than the others and stays in place. The player shooting got upset about this and taunts him to come out and face him. One of the viewers is thankful that this wall is more durable than the others. Now there's another group there, hunting Almond, the newbie. On a survival map, it's unlikely so many players would form teams, and Almond is preparing his bow to shoot. He whispers a few things while hiding. Then he takes his first step out of his cover. As soon as his silhouette is revealed, the first fool gets hit by an arrow. Luckily for him, these players don't have helmets, which helps. Those left alive wonder how he can be so precise. They said bows deal a lot of damage, but that's the trade-off, given the difficulty of handling them. As soon as they finish saying that, there's now an arrow planted in the guy's head. The remaining fool ran to find cover, knowing he would be next. Almond hunts the last one, who says he's a professional who created a new account to play with beginners. Knowing where his voice is coming from, he prepares to shoot his arrow in an arc to hit him. He shoots his arrow high. It goes over the wall. As it reaches its maximum height, it starts falling towards the last fool's head. He screams in pain on the other side, to the surprise of the viewers who didn't expect such mastery from Almond. If he was screaming, it's because he was alive, but the sound helped him once again to shoot another arrow. He fired his second arrow using the same technique as the first. His target screamed desperately once more, prompting Almond to prepare a third arrow. This one finally took down the fool hiding behind the wall. However, the notification said the player had been knocked out, so out of curiosity, Almond went to see what that meant. The viewer says that appears whenever the shot is fatal, but not unique. Almond continues reading the comments to better understand the game he was in, until one of them says that this map is for team combat. That is definitely a piece of information that caught him by surprise. This game mode allows teams of up to 4 players, but it's also possible to play solo. He entered the map the wrong way, an amateur mistake. Even so, he continues receiving donations, which makes him feel grateful. Now he had some doubts about whether that enemy was still alive or not. While he's thinking about this, the tip of a rifle fires a shot in his direction. Almond is hit by the shot and realizes that there was still one member alive in that squad. He falls, wounded by the shot. That feeling is definitely too real. Unnecessarily, he thinks. Another shot nearly hits his head. Almond rolls on the ground while dodging more bullets that are almost hitting him. Soon he manages to find cover to protect himself. He is sitting, trying to catch his breath. His heartbeat spiked for a moment and almost entered the red zone of the game. If it reaches that zone, the game automatically removes the player from the stage because continuing would be too risky. While thinking about this, he heard more footsteps approaching him. He prepares to react and his audience notices that he is scared. The sound of the footsteps continues, but Almond can't precisely tell where they are. Focusing, he realizes they're not far away. They're approaching slowly and aren't worried about making noise. He knows he doesn't stand a chance against a firearm this way, but he has an idea. There's a reason why his attacker is being patient. Their goal isn't to take him out right away. After all, there is a place they need to go. The player stops walking, and this is Almond's time to act. Soon, the arrow hits the fool's head. It was exactly as he thought. That player was trying to revive his squad mate. To the joy of his audience, he had won that fight, even though it was tough. Amidst the donations, there are many names he doesn't recognize, but even if they are small, it feels great to receive them. He is on the right path to being a good streamer. Now is time for him to check the dropped items and collect what would be useful. The first of these is an assault rifle. He looks at the weapon, quite impressed. His eyes light up at it and he wonders if he should take it. At the moment, he is considering whether he should abandon the bow and take the rifle as his equipment. The audience is excited about the possibility, and now he doesn't know what to do, whether to take it or not. If he wins that map, his image will be associated with the bow, which he would like very much. The problem is that if he loses, he doesn't know what the viewers will think of that. But soon he receives a generous donation asking him to win the map using the bow. That was motivation enough now. The one who did that was Jaya, much to his surprise. He wasn't entirely comfortable accepting that money, but he needed the motivation to try. He thanked her and said he would try using only the bow and was harshly criticized by some. There are a few other items that the other players had which he picked up. Now they tell him to go to the farm and find a helmet. Since the farm is far away, it would be interesting to have a means of transportation and someone reminds him of the nearby car. Now he realized that if he could use it to get there faster. And so he did, heading towards that location using the car. He continues on his way to the farm. As he progresses, the scenery changes, with trees and buildings getting closer. He is warned about the risk of heading straight into an area that might have more players. If he made too much noise, he could be ambushed, and it didn't take long for a grenade to be thrown in his direction. It ended up landing very close to his vehicle. Its explosion was strong enough to toss his car. He shields himself from the debris flying in all directions. As things calm down, his car is overturned. He is recovering from the incident and jokes about whether he could apply for an automotive insurance service. Someone says to his misfortune that where there's one grenade, there's two. And sure enough, it doesn't take long for a second one to discreetly fall right next to his car. Another explosion happens and viewers think this might be the end of his adventure. Almond was already out of the car when that happened, ending the sarcastic comments about his demise. The smoke from the fire makes it hard to see things, so he thinks about getting to the nearest rooftop, because that location would help him get a sense of the surroundings. He enters the building, kicking the door open. Upon reaching the rooftop, he notices there was no one there. In the distance, he thinks he might have seen something suspicious. He approached the parapet to get a better look, and ended up having to hide quickly as shots were already being fired in his direction. Sheltered behind the concrete wall, he wonders if he is being ambushed again. A bit further away, one player asks another to stop shooting because he is already hidden. He lowers his rifle, lamenting that it happened. The shooters order two other squad members to enter the building, saying they will provide cover. Almond is still hiding, and they tell him to go back inside the building. He sighs, thinking about what to do. The most important thing at that moment was to stay calm and try to listen to what was happening nearby. He knows there are 4 enemies, but from the sound of footsteps, 2 must be entering the building. The immediate problem is that he can't get up from there or he would be riddled with bullets. In this situation, there is only one viable option. From a distance, the shooter knows that Almond hasn't changed his position yet. He's thinking Almond might have simply given up because he knows if he moves, he'll get hit. But Almond was preparing his bow to take out the fools coming towards him. He can hear the sound of footsteps and precisely pinpoint their position. As soon as he's sure, he fires his arrow into the air. His enemies keep moving closer to his location. He's going to shoot again because the arrow didn't hit its target. A second one seems more promising as it goes in the right direction. One of the fools is now hit by the arrow. The remaining one starts to hurry because his buddy is no longer among the living. His skills with the bow are truly incredible, and people even think the bow must have an aim assist. He likes to see these comments because when he practiced, he made many shots like this as if he were a circus artist. They did many bizarre things like hitting another arrow in midair, for example. That used to annoy his coach a bit, but it seems doing those bizarre tricks helped him a lot. Still in hiding, he hears a different noise. The footsteps he hears are inside the building and getting closer to his position. He knows they belong to the guy who was heading there, and he looks at the terrace door, which is closed. Since his opponent has a firearm, it will be challenging to defeat him at such close range. He doesn't have time to prepare another arrow. He can only hope his opponent misses the shots. His bow is already prepared, just waiting for the right moment, because he's not going to rely on someone else's mistake for his success. The doorknob begins to turn slowly. Almond simply fired his arrow to the dismay of those watching him because the door was still closed. The arrow follows its path and manages to pass through the first crack that appeared, hitting the person inside. With the arrow in his gut, he tries to understand how that happened. It was too fast and the crack barely allowed him to see outside. He can see a little bit of the outside and sees Almond vaguely. His skills are truly remarkable. A head of hair is blowing in the wind. It belongs to the body that just fell on the terrace, lifeless. To everyone's delight, the shot was brilliant and extremely effective. Almond ends up being modest and says the opportunity helped him more than they think. The other 2 shooters are impatient because they don't know what happened in the building. Through the chat, their buddy says he's down and thinks this player is in the wrong rank. The one still alive says he was careless and is trying to make excuses. However, he is intrigued by his squad mate's assessment. They are a good team that participates in amateur championships. And because of personal life challenges, they hadn't played for a while, and when they returned, they went back to the game's initial rank. The one who is down would like to be revived, but his teammates can't go there because they would meet the same fate. Using his last strength, he is crawling to the first floor and says the enemy is not that strong. But the shooter knows his buddy will be used as bait. One of them thinks about abandoning the other because they might be dealing with a professional player. If they ran away, they wouldn't be penalized with a rank loss, but the bravest one would have his pride hurt. This was just a game. He didn't need to be so serious about it. Faced with this dilemma, they are considering going to the dying player, as taking the risk to revive him would be rewarding if they succeeded. They look at the building, ready to go to their buddy. Along the way, they come across the body of the first one to go down. It's a shame he was hit so precisely. One of them wants to run, but the other thinks they should be more cautious. They should go slowly and with their guns aim at him to avoid being surprised. With that, both are aiming at the building's terrace. They soon spot the dying player at the corner crawling on the ground. While one of them keeps aiming, the other suggests they follow along the walls to avoid any shooting angle. They get closer and closer to the building. They are almost there, not only near their teammate, but also at a spot they believe to be Archer's blind spot. But it doesn't take long for an arrow to be heading towards one of them. It comes from the sky in a perfect arc. They realize their heads are being targeted. If they move forward, their movement could be predicted. They needed to dodge the arrow immediately. They stepped to the side, avoiding having an arrow planted in their heads. It got stuck in the ground since it didn't find any fool to rest in. One of them is happy and managed to dodge that. But his teammate wasn't so lucky. He was hit on the side of the head. The last one standing is in disbelief at what he sees. That precision and timing are just absurd. He has no idea how that arrow could have gotten there. The angle is ridiculous. His thoughts are interrupted because now Almond is right in front of him. He's in free fall, ready to shoot an arrow in his direction. The fall hurt him, but at least he took care of everyone. Now he's using painkillers to recover his health. The audience is intrigued by the bold strategy he took and wants to know what he had taken earlier, wondering if they were really painkillers. Another warning appears: the blue zone will shrink again. Now there are only 26 players on the map. Almond is excited because his health has fully recovered. On the keyboard, a player criticizes what just happened. He posts his comment thinking he's found a professional player in the beginner rank, because that player swept his squad like they were amateurs. Even though he's disappointed, his post starts to draw comments. Most of them can't believe all of this was done using just a bow. It's simply too bizarre. He reveals his identity and says that last year he was in the diamond rank, and he knows what he's talking about. The netizens are surprised by his revelation because Calamari was a reasonably famous player in the community. After all, even with a year away, they still played very well, and if he says the archer is a professional, he knows what he's talking about. It doesn't take long for them to find out that this player is also a streamer. Discovering this, Calamari now plans to make sure this professional player gets his due for messing around with beginners. Meanwhile, Almond is looking for items that could help him. But where he is, the items have already been collected. At least the ones he wanted to collect, as the place is full of weapons. Even though some would like to see what he would do with them, he doesn't even think about getting rid of his bow. Then missions appear associated with the bow to win the map using only it and without a squad, with a very generous reward. Now he is curious about the number of viewers, so he decides to take a look. Almost 2,000 viewers simultaneously, a pretty satisfying number for him. He's so happy he needs to control his expression of joy. He says he's going to move on since he didn't find any items of interest. He remembered that his audience almost dropped below 1,000 people when he changed games, and now he wants to know how it increased so much. But reading the comments, something caught his attention. They didn't seem to be that friendly. Almond is impressed that they think he's a disguised professional player. Continuing to read, he figures these new viewers might have reached him because of some forum. Now all he can do is stay optimistic and keep playing so they understand he's actually good. Now he needs to hurry because the blue zone is shrinking. Outside, he hears more gunfire. Now that the area is even smaller, conflicts happen more frequently. So he also needs to move out of there as soon as possible. Now there are only 10 people left on the map. He's already ranked well for his first time. He doesn't know, however, how many teams are left and hopes the remaining players are from different teams. Suddenly, he bumps into another player. He's a little stunned by the collision. Recovering, he can't believe he ran into someone else. And he doesn't even have time to think because there's already a Glock pointed at him. A volley of shots is fired and he barely manages to find cover. Reacting quickly, he takes a position with his bow in hand. He is patiently waiting around the corner for the hostile player to approach. From the sound of footsteps, he knows they are getting closer. But before he could react, his attacker is shot in the head by another player. With him are more people, who are now apprehensive, knowing there is a hidden sniper on the map. This gives Almond time to plan while they are distracted. Playing solo on a team map has its advantages too. He shot another arrow, but it was deflected by the fool's helmet. They hide in the hole they're in, not expecting someone to be using a bow and arrow this late in the game. While recovering his health, he thinks this player must have been hiding the whole time. He thought there would be at most 2 or 3 teams left, but now a dangerous object is coming his way. The arrow this time came from above, destroying his helmet. The remaining buddy is now scared by the arrow's lethality. Before he could prepare to figure out where it came from, he was hit by one too. He has no idea how someone can shoot them from above, and to his dismay, there's already another one coming his way. Now there are only 5 players left on the entire map. Almond can't believe they've been taken out already, and the spectators are amazed at his skill. The conflict continues, and now there are only 4 players remaining. For Almond, that is advantageous as long as the other 3 aren't on the same team. That way, he could get first place. In the next 30 seconds, the blue zone will shrink again. Almond says he's unlucky, but his viewers don't agree with that. The mission's prize keeps increasing, and someone mentions there are snipers in the area. As the map gets smaller, they lose their advantage, but for now, snipers are a significant risk. Once again, Almond hopes the remaining players aren't on the same team. He hears a conversation nearby. It sounds like there's a group of people. Almond's fear has now come true. The remaining 3 are on the same team. The stage is now a 3-on-1 battle. They move cautiously through the stage to avoid being surprised. They were waiting for Almond at a specific point because he would have to pass there if he wanted to get to the blue zone. Looking at the map, they know they have a strategic advantage over the enemy. The blue zone starts to shrink. Almond needs to act. The first place is within his reach. Everything depends on how his next actions unfold. This moment is crucial. It's what distinguishes a good player from a star. Almond needed to prove to those watching him that he is not just a good player. More than that, he is truly talented. He noticed that the enemies are relaxed because they know they have the upper hand. He needs a single moment of distraction, which will be his opportunity to act. Almond prepares by recovering his health. Meanwhile, the blue zone continues to shrink. The other players are waiting for him because it's getting smaller and smaller. They figure he'll show up any moment, but Almond remains still. The barrier finally touches a part of his foot. Soon he is completely outside and his health starts to steadily decrease. Because of this, the players get distracted, thinking they might have lost sight of him. They start to worry he might be behind them preparing an ambush. Allman keeps waiting and needs them to get distracted a little more. Now they don't know which way to look. Finally, they start moving, and this is the opportunity he's been waiting for. The first one is fatally hit by an arrow. The remaining one didn't expect that to happen so suddenly, and he starts shooting in a random direction. He peppers the wall with bullets from his rifle. He started taunting the player, demanding he show himself, but Allman had already moved to another location. His bow is already prepared to fire another arrow. It doesn't take long for the fool to get hit in the head. Allman's health had reduced significantly. He enters the blue zone completely exhausted. What little health he has left gives him a chance, but it won't be easy. But now there's only one player left. While recovering, he realized that since the player stayed hidden even while his teammates were taken out, he must be experienced. And if he hasn't fired yet, it's because he hasn't seen him. He must be the sniper from earlier, and Allman has a general idea of where his blind spots are. The zone started to shrink again. He noticed that one of the players is down and is crawling to a specific position. If he follows him, he might find the other player. But thinking it through, it takes too long to heal a teammate, and that would put them at risk. And judging by how things are, he is still at a disadvantage. This can only be a trap to make him reveal his position. Based on the down player's position, he needs to guess where the sniper is perched. He looks around trying to identify possible hiding spots, because he is certainly very well hidden, just waiting for the right moment to act. Allman is completely focused on solving this problem. Soon he is struck by a sudden realization. He finally found him lying on the ground in a shooting position. And from what it looks like, he still doesn't know Allman is approaching. He needs to seize this opportunity. The difficulty is that he can't draw the bow while crawling on the ground. So he turned his back, surprising those watching him. They think he must have given up, but he started using his feet to draw the bow. That was too cool, as they had only seen that in movies. Allman has never done that and doesn't know if it will work, but he shouldn't worry about it because he'll only have one chance. With the bow between his legs, he needs to make the shot from that unusual position. Once prepared, he fires his arrow toward the target. It follows its trajectory towards the fool's head. The guy finally hears the whizzing of the arrow approaching, but there's not much he can do about it now. He got hit on the head, but his helmet was useful in protecting him this time. After being hit, he quickly took cover behind the nearby barrels to avoid being seen. Once hidden, even Allman's audience knows what's going to happen next. The arrow rises high while the remaining fool calmly recovers his health. It follows its descending trajectory toward him. Once again, he gets hit in the head. But this time, the arrow was planted in his skull like a desert rose. Finally, there was only one player left alive, and it was Allman. During the game's final stage, not many believed he could defeat that squad. They thought he was good, but that he had operational limitations. Even so, he managed to take them down one by one. He was stealthy enough to find those hiding, and creative enough to make a shot using his feet, finishing the stage with his skill in shooting arrows and arcs. He had won a team map all by himself using only a bow and arrow as a weapon. This is definitely a result no one expected to happen. Allman thanks everyone for the donations received during his stream. One of them even came from Mio, a famous streamer. He promptly thanks everyone who donated to him. Mio makes an offer to him, asking if Allman is looking for a clan. He's just a newbie, and from the chat's reaction, that isn't a common invitation. He thanked her for the donation and said he's just a beginner. Mio makes another donation, saying she would be available if he changed his mind, and Allman thanked her for the offer. He finally said goodbye to his audience as he was done for the day. After exiting the game, his friend says that Mio is really famous and isn't joking around showing him his phone. Mio is simply fabulous by their standards. Besides being a streamer, she has the looks of a model. However, it was good he refused the invitation to join her clan. Allman did it to avoid being compared to experienced professionals because he really is a beginner. Now they want to know how his session's reactions were with the audience. Those who followed him for Kingdom Age reacted very well to the new game. But on the new game's site, things weren't so friendly and some people were reporting him. His friend wants to know if he's handling it well, but Allman thinks it only happened because he hid his identity. He thought about making his identity public again, but his friend thinks it's risky, given the hackers out there. He's going to leave it for now, but his friend says all this attention on him could be well used. They thought about using it as a way to increase his popularity, but his account ended up getting suspended from the game. His friend was furious because the game didn't even check the truth and suspended him anyway. While his friend has a fit of rage, Allman makes peace with the fact that they didn't get any blessings, just frustration. He thought he would soon have a response from support about it, but the delay made him think. Once calmer, his friend says this is actually very good. Everything that's happening to them is a way to spark interest in the audience, and since things are this way, it's up to them to know how to take advantage of the opportunity. It was time for him to write a statement about what happened. He started writing and said that during his last game session, he was heavily reported by other players and ended up being suspended, and he didn't get a response from support. It didn't take long for his supporters to start siding with him in this conflict. Allman is happy with the concern of his supporters, while his friend hits back at the virtual haters. To them, it only meant one thing. For support, if you're good at their game, it's because you're cheating. The supporters do what's expected of them. Their reaction can only help with this. The discussion continued throughout the day, and Almond begins to worry if this will really result in something beneficial for him. Almond is on his phone. He had read some comments supporting him. He had just received a message from Jia. Apparently, the fact that he got suspended in his first game is gaining more traction in the virtual community. Some readers say that news seems like bait, but another says it's legit, and that the forum didn't stop commenting about it the day before. On the street, people are talking about the topic and wondering if they should watch him too. The chat on the platform doesn't stop for a minute, constantly commenting on the banning of a good player. They start watching the recording, and the audience hopes this isn't just clickbait that brought them there. With Almond still in the helicopter, they realize he's alone on a team play map. Almond's friend is quite pleased with the reactions to the recording. Many of them thought it was just a catchy title, but they started to realize the truth as they watched the recording. Almond had really done some incredible things that require a lot of skill. Those who watched everything even applauded the showdown between the last two players. Two people watching the recording are quite happy with that edit, even though one of them saw it all live. And it was because of his outstanding performance that he began to be reported by other players. The buzz continued online saying he had been unfairly punished. Because of this, he was suspended for a year for allegedly manipulating the game's rank. This upset people because he was only suspended due to a large number of reports. The game support team didn't even bother to do their part. Once the video showing the game was released, it didn't take long for the topic to spread to other forums. Soon, this situation gained a special place among those who criticized the game's support, which wasn't the best. The movement was so big that even a news website wrote an article about it. Finally, all that commotion reached the game's management team. Someone who appears to have authority starts complaining to those responsible for Almond's account suspension. He was suspended without the match history being reviewed, which contributed to the mistake of his ban. The employee apologizes, saying there were many complaints, but his boss says that just the volume of complaints doesn't exempt him from doing the rest of his job. He continues his reprimand and threatens to fire his employee. The man sighs for a moment because what happened happened. He wants to know the size of Almond's audience and finds out it's around 1,000 people. He also wants to know if there's any other important information he should know about him. The employee doesn't know how to answer, so the boss is more direct. He wants to know if this guy has any connections with someone influential. But he doesn't know how to respond because Almond only started streaming recently. His boss ordered him to hurry up and talk to the forum administrators. He urged his employee to speed up because it was crucial to meet as soon as possible. He wasn't happy about having to worry about something so small at such a delicate time for the company. Apparently, he had just gone through a stage that would determine whether he would be promoted or not. Outside Almond's house, everything is calm. He patiently brushes his teeth, thinking about everything that has happened. So far, there has been no response from the game's support regarding his suspension. He imagined that after a day, the issue would be resolved, but he is surprised by his friend, who is excited. He said everything had disappeared completely. But Almond has no idea what he's talking about. Everything said about him the previous day on the forums had been erased. Not a single post remained. It seems the company doesn't want to acknowledge their mistake and made a point of erasing the incident from history. They want to erase the evidence that they could have been wrong just to avoid admitting that their management is terrible. The challenge now is knowing what to do that day since they can't play Kingdom Age anymore. But Almond asked him not to worry because he was going to take a break that day. He was going to meet one of the directors of Punk that same day. His friend thinks maybe they could get some help from him with that, but Almond isn't so sure about it, and he'll only know for sure once he meets him. He now remembers his childhood days when he practiced with the bow. His coach used to say he had a lot of talent for it, even though he lacked strength because he was young. His mindset toward the sport was truly exceptional. His grandmother didn't quite understand those comments, but the coach said he was just describing what he saw with his own eyes. Talent doesn't develop out of nowhere, and he needed to keep refining himself because they didn't know how far he could go. While being watched, the boy shot another of his arrows, and it hit the center of the target almost perfectly. Seeing that, his coach was greatly surprised because it's not easy to achieve. He approached Almond, who was still practicing. He said that Almond's technique was really excellent. Almond didn't expect he was the one being praised, but the coach replied that if it weren't for his technique, he wouldn't have hit the center of the target, and that regardless of what he did, he should live his life with that mindset. Even if he lacked strength, he should keep moving forward because eventually he would recover and his arrow would hit the target. Almond responded enthusiastically to that great advice. The coach continued, saying that if it were possible for him, he should never stop practicing with the bow because he had a knack for it. Almond looks up the sky, remembering those words he heard when he was younger. Calm, focused, and thoughtful were frequent compliments in his childhood. Qualities that made him the archer he is today, but simple words that could be the introduction of a resume. He has no idea what the future holds for him, and someone calls out to him as he walks down the street. It's the director, who thanked him for coming. The two continue to walk while talking. Soon, silence starts to fill the space between them. He wants to ask the boy a question, who turns to him. The director wants to know if he doesn't usually get nervous often. Almond takes a moment to respond because he didn't understand that question from him. The director raises his hand to explain. because even veteran streamers get nervous having to deal with the director, but Almond says he's kind of clueless. Even so, he said that Almond seemed very focused when playing, and Almond asked if he had seen the recording, and he said yes, that he watches all of them. Now they were in an expensive restaurant for lunch, and he doesn't even make enough money to go to a place like that. The manager, who was actually the one who came to get the director, said he had just arrived. He asked the boy not to be nervous because he's a very important asset to them. But Almond didn't understand that because he doesn't think he's done anything significant so far. The director finally arrived to meet Almond. He introduces himself by name, Yu, and the man says he is very happy to finally meet him. The person standing in front of him. This man is the director of Punk and was extending his hand. He is Han Taeho. He said he was honored to finally meet him, and the director liked that attitude. The first impression of the boy is very good. He is quite different from the other streamers. And soon, he started to notice something during the handshake. The boy's hand wouldn't stop trembling, and he thought he was nervous about the meeting. Finally, they are all at the table, ready to eat, and the chef is presenting the dishes to them. The director compliments the food and says it's much more delicious when paid for with the company card. Almond watches the jokes and smiles discreetly at them. As soon as he tries the first piece of sushi, he is surprised. It was indeed of an unprecedented quality in his life. The director notices his reaction and emphasizes that the pieces there are very good and that the chef is an award-winning person. He asks if the boy has ever been to a place like that because he knows how to conduct himself very well, and Almond said he has had some dinners in similar places. The manager begins to talk about a few things with the director in a low voice. As soon as he finishes listening, he says Almond is really a unique genius. There is a director from another company there at the restaurant who usually comes by as well. He is Lee Chilson, someone Han knows as they both went to the same school. Almond didn't expect the world to be such a small place. Even so, he isn't surprised that people in leadership positions always come from a select group of people who usually know each other. And judging by his reaction, it must be really close. More than that, it seems there is mutual respect in this friendship. The director says what he does is clean up the messes foreign companies make. But even so, he has a global influence and many of his colleagues would like to work at Punk. He said the boy is not very talkative, which is expected for a streamer. Which is unfortunate because even if a streamer becomes popular, the bet on their image is always very high. And since he changed companies, he would like to know if something happened to motivate his departure. That's a very personal question, and his answer could come off as a bit rude. But that's good because it shows the director is interested in him, and if they build a good relationship, he might help him with the suspension problem. Almond wonders if this is the time to talk about it because it would be the first time telling someone who isn't close to him. So he tells the director that before being a streamer, he used to be a professional archer and was very good at what he did. This information was a bit surprising, and the manager didn't expect him to have real experience with bows. But that was really interesting, because as far as he knows, this is one of the director's hobbies, who would also like to know why he gave up his career. Almond takes a moment before answering that. He had to stop because of an injury, and the director remembered that the boy's hand was trembling a lot, and Almond confirmed that this was exactly the reason. He wants to know how it happened, and Almond says it was while he was returning home after winning a national competition. That placed him at the same level as the world competition, and they wanted to know when that happened. Almond said he was only 17 years old, which surprised them. He tried for 3 more years, but the injury limited him greatly, so he started working at Awesome. And he got in there not because of his skills, which led to some gossip about it. That's when he started getting interested in virtual reality games. Because in games, things were different. His hand moved normally, as the director pointed out, and since he needed money, he became a streamer. While his grandmother was alive, he didn't have time to think about regrets, and even though he knew about games, he was concerned about working in a conventional way. Hearing this, the director is more aware of the situation of the streamer he was interested in. And he said that life rarely happens the way we plan. Even though it's a cliche, it's what makes life fun is unpredictability. There's no guarantee that a fully planned life is fun. He himself wanted to be an idle hare, but is relieved he doesn't live that way today. He's happy to be who he is because he has good opportunities, and he imagines the same will happen with Almond. So the boy thanks him for the encouraging words. Soon, the manager changes the subject and asks about the new game Almond had started. And Almond confirms enthusiastically about it. He said there's a problem now, but before he could finish his thought, the manager interrupted him. This was the time for him to bring up the request for help. He had a chart in front of them and asked the boy if he understood it. The director has an idea of what it is, but they are both curious now. It shows the increase in Kingdom Age sales after he started playing. And his name is mentioned in several reviews about the game as well. Thanks to him, he now has more influence over that company too. Even the director is impressed with the sales increase. He was going to talk about it the next day, but he wanted Almond to know about these statistics too, which Almond didn't even imagine had happened. Based on the numbers, Almond has the potential to be a star, and the director agrees. He quickly compliments the boy and says he's amazing, making Almond a bit embarrassed. Those weren't empty words. He truly believes in Almond's success as a streamer. And that's a closed game. There's simply no way for him to keep playing. It doesn't take long for the director to ask which game he chose to start playing now. He said it's Battle Large, a very popular game, and even the director's son plays it a lot. Then he asked Allman how his experience with this new game has been. The manager gives him a discreet wink, reminding the young man not to forget to mention what has been happening to him. He noticed and decided to take the opportunity. He tells the director that he currently has an issue to resolve. In the company lobby, the employees are lined up to enter early in the morning. One guy walks quickly, unaware that trouble is brewing for him. He wants to know why the manager wants to speak to him so early. He imagines it must be related to his promotion or some good news. He promptly introduces himself, expecting to receive good news at the start of the day. The manager asks him to enter the room and take his seat. The assistant manager is also in the room with them. Then the meeting begins because they were called there for a very specific reason. He asked both of them where he had needed to go that morning, and signaling with his hand, he pointed to the upper floors. He just came out of the executive director's office, which wasn't a good sign. After all, it seems the directors heard a strange rumor about the company. Turning to the guide, he asked if they knew who Allman was, which immediately surprised him. It's impossible that the issue reached them because he made sure to delete all the evidence about it. Now a bit more emphatic and furious, he asked if they knew who this boy was, and the guy said he knew who he was. And since they know who he is, he won't beat around the bush anymore, as both are leaving the company anyway. Unfortunately, the guy didn't expect this, which left his superior quite surprised. Since he doesn't know the situation, he has no idea where the executive director heard the rumor, because the guy tried to cover up the mistake without even investigating the situation. Now he realizes the magnitude of the mistake he made, which makes his blood run cold. Allman is just a streamer who works for Punk. Despite his low number of viewers, he's already associated with a major company. He single-handedly made Kingdom Age sales increase fivefold, which caught the executive director's interest in the situation. Even if they make good games, losing Punk's support would be extremely disastrous. Even so, he suspended one of their streamers without concrete evidence of any wrongdoing. The man puts his hand on his head, pondering the situation. Covering up mistakes is something every company does, but the first rule for that is knowing what they're doing. But it seems the two in front of him are too unprepared for this role. The guy tries to ask the manager for another chance, but is ignored. He says he's dismissed and that Allman's case will be handed over to another team now. This is an outcome the guy didn't expect. Seeing they were still in his office, he rushed them out quickly. After a brief silence, he announced he was leaving the office. Meanwhile, the manager continues working on his tablet. He congratulates the other team for ending Allman's suspension from their game. Now it was time to prepare everything for the Punk recording with Allman. Outside, the guy tries to confront his former co-worker. He says he had asked him if Allman was someone who had connections with influential people. And when he asked, the guy said he didn't know and assumed he didn't. To the guy, this whole problem was his colleague's fault. In response, the colleague wants to know why all the blame is fallen on him, because he also felt pressured since it was the guy who wanted to sweep things under the rug. It didn't take long for the two to start fighting, and security had to separate them. The sun shines inside Allman's house. He is eating and someone asks how his meeting went the day before. His friend didn't get to ask the previous day because he had fallen asleep. Allman says everything went well and that it was quite simple to resolve this situation. But that answer was too vague. His friend wants to know all the details of the meeting. He said that apparently the director liked him a lot. He was interested in having some archery lessons with him, and another meeting was already scheduled for that to happen. That was wonderful. These private lessons could help him build an excellent network. His friend is very proud of him because he thought he might end up saying something stupid. He also asked if he mentioned anything about the unfair suspension he received. He said that Director Han would talk to the executives of Battle Large to resolve this situation, and while they were talking, the phone rang. They went to see what that signal was, and finally the game team had gotten back to them about the suspension. They are apologizing for the suspension. That really confirms that Han liked the boy, because he got in touch with another director early in the morning. And judging by the time, it probably didn't take long from when he got to work to when he talked to the other director. His friend is happy with that influential network of contacts. And since it was still morning, he's going to eat real food instead of cereal since he doesn't like it. Allman says he's going to work out because he drank too much the day before. As soon as he goes outside, he remembers something. It was time to post online that his suspension had been reversed. As soon as he makes the announcement, his fans celebrate the result. The volume of responses is huge, and all the words are supportive. Jaya is very happy that in the end, everything worked out for her friend. Similarly, articles supporting the boy start to spread. To some people's surprise, complaints against the game's support were already piling up. One video in particular made her a bit curious. Moreover, Allman had won a fight against the administration of Battle Large, and that in itself is a big achievement. On the internet, Small Long makes his video about the subject. He questions the suspension of a player who was playing his first match. This wasn't the first time the game's support team proved ineffective in resolving issues, but the point in question was to explain why his suspension was corrected so quickly. This was due to the intervention of the Punk director, who pulled a few strings. They made a mistake by trying to ignore the streamer, not knowing he was affiliated with a major company just because of his viewer count. It didn't take long for this video to get many views in a short amount of time. He even thought the audience came because of the grudge players have against the battle large support team. He soon realized in the comments that the audience was defending Almond because he implied that the boy was privileged. The high view count came from casual players who only knew about Almond and not about the company's poor support. Curious to know who Almond is, the exceptional player who is now calmly having a meal. Even so, he's holding his phone and reading the news. His friend asks if he read something bad, judging by his expression. He's shocked by the number of views they got. His friend confirms it's really high. Then it hits him. 400,000 is an exceptional number for them. He can't believe what he's seeing. It's possible that video went viral. These things happen. But there must be something behind it. Maybe it's all because of the unfair suspension he received. And maybe that's it. There are several related videos discussing the same topic. Soon the guy starts celebrating the notoriety they are gaining from this. Even so, that's another platform, so they should keep focusing on streaming. His friend quickly returns to reality, realizing that makes perfect sense and should be their focus. So he sits back at the table as if nothing happened. Even so, it's not like he isn't excited about it. But the popularity of celebrities might not last, and he can't let his emotions fluctuate with it. He is now getting ready to start another session, trying to keep his mind in check. Mental control is a basic skill for professional archers. Now he notices the chat is much busier than usual. A series of messages starts catching his attention. It's simply unbelievable. He immediately gets out of the capsule, prompting his friend to ask why he already got out. But it was just an accident. He moved unintentionally and caused the capsule to open spontaneously, and he was already getting back in. Once inside again, Almond says he didn't see it wrong. His audience had already surpassed 2,000 people. That wasn't a mistake. His friend realized this was the reason he left the capsule and made a joke about the situation. This was the beginning of the rise to stardom. All he had to do was perform his job well. And that's what he'll do because the audience on one platform has nothing to do with the other. And his character, Almond, is causing these audiences to gather around him. The audience keeps growing and he needs to seize this opportunity. This situation is similar to ones he's already experienced. What's different now is the way he expresses himself. Almond stays focused in his capsule. The messages of support truly make him happy. And it doesn't take long for him to greet his audience. They want to know a lot of things, and he realizes the chat is much more diverse than usual. All two had a much wider range of people than Tribe. After a brief explanation, those watching him now understand why he was suspended. He starts receiving donations and thanks for being affiliated with Punk, as it was the company that resolved this issue. And some of them start saying that Small Long's rumor was correct. Even though he didn't understand that reaction, the number of people in his live stream only increases. Once everything was explained, it was time to start playing, and one of them made a comment about Kingdom. Almond felt a bit down because he liked that game a lot. But his time with that game was already over. The game of the moment was Battle Large once again. His character materializes in the stage. This time he did it right and entered a solo player map. Even so, there aren't high expectations for him because that type of game is extremely unpredictable. Even if the player is very skilled, luck is a major factor in each stage. Almond needed to be fully focused to perform well, because he still has a lot to prove about his skills. A mission with a generous reward appears, and the prize will only come if he can win that map. Almond looks at the challenge thoughtfully. He accepts it because he is confident in his abilities. He is certainly going to win now given the monetary motivation he has received. Now it's time for him to get ready to actually play. He grabs an arrow with his hands. This is his first solo match, and he already has a mission if he manages to win. Moreover, there are 4,000 people watching him. Finally, everything was set for the challenge to begin. Whether he becomes a star or just a skilled streamer, it all depends now on his abilities and nothing else. And this is the variable he is able to control. A message appears saying that all players are ready for the start of the game. This is exactly what Almond was aiming for, as he can't wait to show off his skills once again. The game has finally begun and Almond is ready. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell and see you next time on Tob's channel.